Chapter 371. Name: Armor-piercing incendiary bullet item type. Consumable quality. Excellent special effect. It will explode after penetrating the target's first layer of defense. If it fails to penetrate the first layer of defense, it will explode, but its damage will be halved. Usage requirement: Marksmanship C or Workmanship B remark. Made from depleted uranium alloy with the aid of liquid propellant. It has high penetrative power, and the explosion effect is fire elemental damage. This kind of special ammunition could be found quite often at the auction house. Most of them were expensive, and they were sold for more than HP potions, 12,000 game coins. However, those who had used it before knew that, as long as one held one in one's hand, one could use it to change the direction of the battle or even decide the outcome of the battle. In the current thriller paradise, most of the above-average teams were attracted to players who specialized in marksmanship because they had the ability to turn the tide of battle into victory. Furthermore, this kind of damage could be obtained at a relatively low cost. If it was a fighting mastery player who wanted a weapon that could turn the tide of a battle, the price would be at least 6 digits. However, shooting mastery players did not need that. They only needed a normal gun and a bullet that cost more than 10,000 game coins, and they could deal damage that could only be achieved by fighting mastery players with hundreds of thousands of game coins. Even though bullets were consumables and would disappear after they were fired, looking at it from another perspective, it was not something that should be used as soon as they were bought. They could be treated as a kind of insurance or a trump card. They would only be used at the most opportune and crucial moment. Perhaps they would only be used after many scenarios. Based on this calculation, if one were to buy 30 of these bullets and equip them with a medium-grade gun, they would be able to use them for a very long time. Perhaps the equipment that the fighting mastery players spent hundreds of thousands of game coins on was already obsolete, and the shooting mastery players still had bullets. For a female tycoon like Gu Shaoling, choosing this mastery was a bit of a waste. Currently, it was publicly acknowledged on the gaming forum that the most expensive mastery to train was workmanship and summoning. Marksmanship and sleuthing were 2 masteries that could be achieved with little money. Of course, if it was purely for the money, the mastery would not have mattered. After all, it was just a bullet that cost 10,000 game coins. If converted to RMB, it would only cost 6 or 7 RMB per pill. As long as he spent 50,000 renminbi, he could even buy a Gatling gun filled with special bullets and shoot at the enemy. Back to the topic at hand, the armor-piercing incendiary bullet tore through the air and hit the outer shell of the pufferfish gladiator. Even though in the scenario, the toughness of the toys was shocking, Laughing Soul Shot was not something that could be blocked by the Lego bricks. TSS, TSS, TSS. After a series of short and continuous strange sounds, the bullets penetrated the outer shell of the pufferfish gladiator and penetrated its body. Coincidentally, the location of the bullet was very subtle. It happened to be in the area between the main cockpit and the co-pilot cabin. If the bullet had been slightly off target and shot into either of the 2 cockpits, it would have exploded in midair. Its energy would be fully released, and it would cause considerable damage to the pilot in the enclosed environment. However, the bullet was embedded in the building block and ignited, and the result was boom, patter, patter, patter. After the explosion, there was the sound of many pieces of Lego bricks scattering. An unexpected scene happened. The pufferfish gladiator was blown in half. The front half was a large, round fish head. The back half was a thinner fish tail and 2 legs. The 2 pilots were in relatively good condition inside the cockpit, but both of them had lost 35% of their life points. Xiao Tan, who was inside the fish head, was basically a sitting duck, but since he was stunned by the sudden explosion, he would not be able to escape in a short amount of time. Feng Bujue, who was inside the fishtail, soon came to the correct conclusion about what was happening. It's an armor-piercing incendiary bullet. The 4 members of Underworld Frontline know each other's equipment and skills very well. That was a wise choice, but it seems like luck is not on our side because it failed to explode in midair. As he mumbled to himself, he reached out to press the buttons before him. After all, The pufferfish gladiator had died before it even started, so he might as well try to see if there were any weapons that were still working. But the combat ability of the pufferfish gladiator was far beyond normal people's imagination. After Brother Jew pressed the buttons randomly, 5 things happened. 1. The fish head that had lost contact with the co-pilot suddenly received the command from the weapon system. It suddenly bulged, and many sharp spikes grew out from its surface. 2. The fin started to spin like a chainsaw. 3. The theme song for Piggy in a Sunny Day, A Genuine Smile, started to play inside the co-pilot cabin. For the back half of the pufferfish gladiator, with the connecting point of the 2 legs as the axis started to change. The cockpit turned 90 degrees upward, and the legs underneath were fixed in a half-squatting position. 5. A launch tube popped out from the top of the co-pilot cabin at a 45-degree angle, and it fired a round cannonball directly upward. 10 seconds later, the cannonball went straight up and down and landed precisely inside the barrel. There was a small explosion, and it caused Fong Bujue to lose another 10% of his life points due to the impact of the explosion. The monster is still moving even after being split in half. Laughing Soul's eyes wandered between the 2 halves of the pufferfish gladiator. Furthermore, the 2 halves have become even more disgusting than before. Passing Rain added, Laughing Soul glanced at the enemy's status in the game menu. After confirming that Brother Jew and Xiao Tan were still alive, she said, the 2 halves of the Lego monster have changed after the explosion. This means that there are people controlling both sides. She made a logical deduction. Even though the process was not completely correct, the conclusion was not wrong. But the thing's movement is so strange. It looks like the driver is messing around with the controls, Passing Rain said. Then, there are 3 possibilities. Laughing Soul's mind turned quickly, and she soon replied, 1. The leader and Xiao Tan have not mastered the usage of this Lego vehicle. 2. The thing has malfunctioned, and it cannot be operated normally. 3. These actions are purposely faked to confuse us. Then, Passing Rain signaled for her to continue. Actually, no matter which one it is, it has no effect on us. As Laughing Soul said that, she loaded another armor-piercing bullet into the sniper rifle and said with a smile, just one more shot. Just as Laughing Soul prepared to fire the last shot at the weird-looking pufferfish's tail, Fong Bujue, who was inside it, pressed the button that came with the warning sign of a nuclear weapon. I don't believe that crazy primary school student can make a nuclear bomb out of Lego. Fong Bujue screamed when he pressed the button. Whoosh, whoosh. That was the sound of a rocket blasting into the sky. The pufferfish gladiator, which was in a squatting position, shot out a thick flame from its tail. The connection between the legs and the torso was severed. The powerful thrusters of the fishtail sent the fuselage, which had been turned 90 degrees upward, into the sky. Hey, is this thing itself a warhead? Fong Bujue was deeply shocked. There's a happy song playing inside the cockpit, and it has launched a suicide attack. Laughing Soul and Passing Rain, who were at the top of the shelf, raised their heads from behind the scope and put down the binoculars. Both of them looked at the sudden light in the dark and the slowly rising pufferfish gladiator. Their faces were expressionless, and they were stunned. Xiao Tan was very lucky. At this moment, when no one was paying attention to him, he recovered from his shock. He pushed open the cover of the cockpit and poked his head out to look. He did not expect to see the pufferfish gladiator rocket blasting into the sky. What the hell? Shouting could not close his mouth. Are we going to ascend to heaven? Don't panic. Fong Bujue inside, the pufferfish gladiator, said to himself. At this moment, we only need to find the time machine. No. He forced himself to stop from complaining. Fine, let me think about this calmly. This thing has no target, so it will fly straight into the ceiling of the supermarket. Therefore, I only need to open the cover and jump out. Then, I can use Jeppo to escape. With that in mind, he thought, but this feat will undoubtedly attract the attention of Passing Rain and Laughing Soul. After I open the cover, I might be attacked directly. The reality matched Fong Bujue's assumption. After the temporary shock, Laughing Soul raised the sniper rifle and aimed at the pufferfish gladiator that was already beyond the sniping point. Several seconds later, the cover really did open. At that moment, Laughing Soul focused on aiming at the hatch. But almost at the same time as the cover opened, with a bang, the shell on the other side of the pufferfish gladiator was broken from the inside. Following the Lego blocks that fell out, a red glow figure jumped out from the hole. He used Jeppo to cover 1 meter in the blink of an eye and rushed to the top of the shelf that was closest to him. Fong Bujua's diversion tactic was very successful. He knew that the moment he opened the cover, the enemy's attention would be focused on the exit of the cockpit. At this moment, his opportunity came. As long as he opened a hole on the other side and used body enhancement spell to rush out, Laughing Soul, who was aiming at the hatch, would not be able to change her aim in time. After all, this was not Counter-Strike, where one move of the mouse would result in a 60-degree swing. It was practically impossible to hit the target with a flick while holding a heavy sniper rifle with one's hands. Xiao Tan has discovered our location. He's running up the wall. When Passing Rain said that, she had already rushed forward. The direction she was heading was the shelf that Fong Bujua was at. Okay, leave it to me. Laughing Soul naturally understood what her cousin meant. She carried the sniper rifle to the edge of the shelf. When she looked down, she saw Xiao Tan running up the edge of the shelf. Such an idiot. Go half a circle to the side before going up the wall. She grumbled as she aimed the scope at Xiao Tan's legs. On the other side, after a few leaps, Passing Rain arrived at the top of the shelf that Fong Bujua had jumped on earlier, but the ladder had already disappeared. Relying on her instinct, Passing Rain continued to chase in a certain direction. At that moment, she had already put the night vision binoculars back in her backpack. The weapon in her hand had changed to the holy sword. Boom! There was another loud boom. It was the rocket that had hit the ceiling and exploded. This thing was quite powerful for a toy, but it was not as powerful as a nuclear bomb. It was more like a firecracker, but the pieces that it scattered were more dangerous than paper. The environment of a supermarket would not be damaged by the attack of a toy, but this rocket had triggered the automatic fire protection system. The lights of the supermarket came on at that moment, and the sprinklers on the ceiling started to spray water. For the players who had been shrunk, this was like a sudden downpour. Yo, that wet beauty over there. Fong Bujua's voice suddenly came from behind Passing Rain. Are you looking for me? Passing Rain slowly turned around. She raised her hand to push the hair on her forehead back to prevent the wet hair from blocking her vision. Perhaps it was the effect of the light and the mist. Her face appeared exceptionally pale and blurry. Fong Bujua had not seen Passing Rain like this before. You're not going to run anymore? She asked. You'll notice me soon after I switch on the lights. Fong Bujua said, furthermore, I didn't plan to run in the first place. He also pushed his hair back, using the water to make it look like a swept-back hairstyle. I'm the stronger one, right? Look, I could have ambushed you from behind, but I greeted you first. Oomph. Passing Rain laughed. It was a smile, but it was also a sneer. I rarely see you smile at me. Fong Bujua said. I don't smile at anyone. Passing Rain replied. So you're not targeting me. Fong Bujua said. Can we talk about this later? Passing Rain tried to change the topic. After all, everyone is soaked like a drowned rat, so it doesn't matter anymore, Fong Bujua said. If you want to talk, do it offline another day. Passing Rain raised her sword. If you continue to stand there so fearlessly and empty-handed, you'll have to bear the consequences. Offline or on the phone. Fong Bujua still sounded relaxed, and he brought the topic back. You want to meet me, right? Passing Rain said. No. Fong Bujua shook his head. Passing Rain looked at each other in silence. Yes. Brother Ju was defeated by her gaze and told the truth. So, you already know that I live in City S? Passing Rain asked. Of course, with my investigative skills. Fong Bujua was just about to boast. If you lose to me, Passing Rain interrupted, you'd better be prepared to be arrested as a stalker. Hey, it's suddenly a threat. Fong Bujua was shocked, but then he paused and asked, if I win. Chapter 372. Using the title skill, Flying Scorpion's Mark, Xiao Tan ran along the edge of the shelf, heading toward Laughing Soul. He knew Laughing Soul's weakness. She was too weak in close combat. It was too weak and not relatively weak or average. Therefore, close combat was advantageous for Xiao Tan, and it was the only way for him to win. But things were not as simple as he thought. Laughing Soul was weak in close combat because she was strong in other areas. Most of the enemies would not even have the chance to get close to her before they were killed. Excellent long-distance fighting ability and superior intellect. Such a player would be hard to deal with. When the enemy got close to her, she could come up with many ways to stop them. Such an idiot. If this was a competition, they wouldn't be so kind as to aim at your leg. Laughing Soul grumbled as she aimed at Xiao Tan's leg. She was being merciful. Even the bullets in the sniper rifle were replaced with normal bullets and did not use any special bullets. Bang! The gunshot rang out, and the moment the bullet was fired, Xiao Tan used almost zero time difference to change his running path and used wind stops the dust, and the fragrant flowers are gone. The bullet pierced through the afterimage that lasted for 3 seconds, and Xiao Tan himself was unharmed. Oh! Laughing Soul was startled. The miss was out of her expectation. Interesting, he managed to evade it on his own. She aimed and prepared to fire a second shot. Unexpectedly, she saw an unbelievable scene through the scope. Xiao Tan started to move in a zigzag pattern. Every 1 to 2 seconds, he would release a shadow. Not bad. This time, Laughing Soul had a whole new level of respect for him. Using the shadow to create visual misdirection, combined with the irregular movement that keeps changing direction. Even the running speed and the frequency of the skills are constantly changing. She smiled. A sniper's nightmare. After she said that in a relaxed tone, Laughing Soul took out 2 submachine guns from her inventory. One of them was the MP5 that she had been using, and the other was the Uzi that she had recently gotten. Name, Uzi item type, weapon quality, normal attack, medium, attribute, none, effect, none, prerequisite. Marksmanship F, remarks, reliable, light, easy to operate, and low cost. Level 30 players were far stronger than normal people in the real world. Even a woman could use the Desert Eagle single-handedly like a governor. Therefore, it was easy for Laughing Soul to wield 2 mini submachine guns in battle. Tap, 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 2 submachine guns with extremely fast-firing speed poured out a large number of bullets within a few seconds. Xiao Tan's current position was not too far away from the top of the container. Facing the barrage of bullets that enveloped him from a short distance, he was truly helpless. In an instant, he was hit by more than 10 bullets. Needless to say, he was inflicted with a bleed effect. What was even more troublesome was that the injury affected his movement. It was difficult for him to change directions like just now, so there was no point in using an afterimage. Seeing the Laughing Soul before him, he could not take another step forward. If he stopped now, he would fall, and all his previous efforts would be wasted. In this fleeting moment, most people would not have the time to come up with a plan, but there was something in Wang Tanji's blood that told him what to do. Let's take a gamble. At that moment, his expression turned cold. The usual gentleness in his eyes disappeared, and there was an indescribable hostility radiating from between his brows. Using the military knife in his hand, Xiao Tan used reverse spinning slash on the vertical edge of the container. A 75% success rate for a level C mastery was not low, so the activation of the skill was not a problem. Using the movement derived from the skill, he held the military knife in a reverse grip and used the wall to spin upward. Laughing Soul did not expect the enemy to attack instead of retreating, so she was caught off guard. After firing for about 10 seconds, the bullets in her 2 guns were almost empty. With a gun in each hand, she couldn't quickly change the magazine. Therefore, the situation was turned around in an instant. The reverse spinning slash not only helped Xiao Tan reach the top of the container, it also deflected some of the bullets that came at him, minimizing the damage that he suffered. Laughing Soul had no choice but to retreat and run away to create some distance between them. He really came up. When Laughing Soul said that, it was hard to tell whether she was happy or sad. In any case, at this point, she had to accept this fact. Once we're on the same level, The advantage of the terrain is no longer there. Furthermore, he moves faster than me, so it's only a matter of time before he reaches me. In the blink of an eye, the shadow behind Laughing Soul closed in on her like lightning, not giving her any chance to breathe. Bang, bang, bang. Laughing Soul decisively put the guns in her backpack and pulled out 2 more guns from the holster around her waist to provide suppressive fire. As she pulled out the guns, she turned and slid. Her original plan of running away with her back facing the enemy changed to a horizontal movement facing the enemy head-on. Xiao Tan's life points had taken quite a bit of damage from the explosion earlier, and when he rushed up the container, he had taken quite a bit of damage. It would be difficult for him to survive another powerful attack. Therefore, he had to prioritize evasion, just in case. With this delay, the distance between the two was pulled back several steps, and this gave Laughing Soul the chance to reload. She took out the MP5 again and grabbed a magazine from the pocket of her Special Forces outfit. As she ran, she said, "If I'm not mistaken, your reverse spinning slash has a cooldown of 1 minute. That is indeed a killer move that poses a great threat to me. 1, it can shorten the distance. 2, it can deflect bullets. And 3, it can cause damage. You can say that it is a combination of offense and defense." Laughing Soul tried to remind the man, "But based on my estimation, your life points should be less than 20% now. At this distance, you won't be able to last more than 1 minute with that bit of life points." She paused for a second before continuing. "My suggestion is you should drink a health potion and maintain the close distance. When the cooldown of the skill is over, you can end the battle in 1 hit. Or you should give up on the chase and leave my sight so that you can find another chance to sneak up on me." "Even though I know you mean well," Xiao Tan said coldly. "But when a man is serious about something, don't tell him what to do." At this point, he exploded with incredible speed and charged at Laughing Soul. "What?" Laughing Soul's heart raced, and her blood boiled. "How dare you talk to me like that? How dare you?" Without a doubt, she was angered, and she fired at Chengge with all her might. However, Xiao Tan managed to evade all of them. He repeatedly used Wine Stops Dust. The Fragrant Flower has ended, which had a cooldown of 1 second, and Devil Bat Ghostly Shadow, which had a cooldown of 5 seconds. With his unpredictable footwork, he maintained the existence of more than 3 illusions while his charge speed did not decrease. This was not only the nightmare of Sniper, but also the nightmare of any long-range weapon user. In Laughing Soul's eyes, there appeared to be 3 Wong Tanji charging at her, and they were so close and far that it was impossible to tell which one was real. This time, Laughing Soul was really spooked. She swung her gun left and right and fired blindly as she retreated quickly. However, if she did that, she would be relying on luck. No matter how high her mastery was, it would be useless. Furthermore, she was just a grade C. Finally, when Reverse Whirlwind Slash finished its cooldown, Xiao Tan was less than 5 steps away from Laughing Soul. "I'm sorry. The result has been..." Xiao Tan did not manage to finish the word because Laughing Soul had also used her trump card. She suddenly moved in the opposite direction and jumped into Xiao Tan's arms, wrapping her arms around his waist. Xiao Tan, who was about to use his skill, was shocked. He did not expect something like that. Laughing Soul was forced into a corner, and that was why she came up with this plan. She was not in a good mood. Not only had she been yelled at by Xiao Tan, she was about to lose. Therefore, she had nowhere to vent her anger. She wished she could run forward to strangle Xiao Tan's neck and pull out his hair. The grappling came so suddenly that Xiao Tan was unable to use any of his skills. What happened next was completely out of control. After the two of them collided, they fell to the side and fell forward. They flew out from the top of the container, tangled together, and fell to the ground. "So, it's a mutual destruction, huh?" Xiao Tan had returned to his normal self in midair. He looked at the ceiling that was moving further and further away from him. Without a doubt, the 2 players who had been shrunk to the size of toys would definitely die if they fell from such a height. Go to hell, go to hell, go to hell, go to hell. Laughing Soul did not seem like she was going to give up so easily. In midair, she managed to strangle Xiao Tan from behind and yanked on his hair. Ah, ouch. What are you doing? Xiao Tan's life points did not drop that much, but it was painful. Ah, I can't take it anymore. I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying. At the same time, at the top of another container. It seems like it's over there as well. Passing Rain used her cold gaze to look at Feng Bujue, who was lying in a pool of blood. Feng Bujue heard that and looked at the game menu. Xiao Tan and Laughing Soul's status were both dead. He was about to open his mouth to reply when he coughed out a mouthful of blood. Cough. Cough. Is it a mutual destruction? I didn't expect that. Brother Ju smiled bitterly. Of course. I also didn't expect to be beaten up so badly by you. You still have one more skill. Passing Rain waved the holy sealing sword lightly, and the blood on the blade disappeared instantly. Quick, use Descent of the War Demon. Just think of it as a warm-up. Feng Bujue licked the blood on his lips. Before I use the ultimate skill, do you mind if I ask, what is with your ridiculous combat ability? Just like you, it's Soul's Eye, Passing Rain replied. Feng Bujue was confused. I see, but why are you so strong? Why aren't you on the combat ability ranking? Because your Soul's Eye can be used continuously, Passing Rain replied, and mine can be used instantly. Oh, so it's a power that varies from person to person. Feng Bujue said. Okay, I'm sorry. Why are you apologizing? Because I got second place on the combat ability ranking, and I was too proud of myself. Now it looks like I brought this upon myself. There's no need to apologize. You've always been like this. Air. Chapter 373. When Passing Rain said, like you, she's a Soul's Eye, several questions popped up in Feng Bujue's mind. Even though he had shared almost all the information he had with his teammates since he entered the game, there were a few things that he still kept to himself. For example, his encounter with Woody in the login lobby, his interactions with several anomalies, and the term Soul's Eye. However, Passing Rain's words showed that she not only knew about the existence of Soul's Eye, she also knew about Feng Bujue's power. I get it now. She should have awakened a long time ago. Feng Bujue thought about it for a few seconds and came up with a logical explanation. Perhaps she didn't know what this power was initially, but later she found out about the term Soul's Eye. If it was me, I would have tried to find a way to get to the bottom of this. Today, when she found out that the person who suddenly rose to second place on the combat stat ranking was me, she immediately came to the conclusion that my sudden rise in ranking was caused by the awakening of Soul's Eye. And in the battle earlier, she noticed that my power type is different from hers. Wait a minute. In that case, she knows more about Soul's Eye than I do. After we leave the scenario, I'll have to ask her about it. These thoughts flashed through his mind, but it was not the time to delve into them. Even if Passing Rain did not attack, the bleeding effect would not wait for him. If he did not activate Descent of the War Demon soon, Feng Bujue would turn into white light. Then, I shall not hold back, Feng Bujue said and activated his title skill. Darkness. Endless darkness. Soundless, breathless, colorless, tasteless. Here, low-dimensional creatures would involuntarily question their own existence. Because they had lost all their senses, only their consciousness remained. What is going on? Feng Bujue could not tell whether the question came from his mouth or from his heart. At that moment, Feng Bujue had lost his five senses. Even if he could speak, he would not be able to hear it. 1 second ago, I was lying on top of the container. How did this happen? Feng Bujue mumbled. Is this some kind of illusion? Game bug? What made him feel uneasy was that he was clearly in non-sleep mode, but he couldn't even feel his own body in the real world. Furthermore, the game menu was no longer working. Could it be that the unknown shadow in my mind has finally acted up? Feng Bujue was a person who always prepared for the worst, so he began to suspect that he might have suddenly died in the gaming pod. Another pitiful soul. Suddenly, a low voice entered his ears. Who is it? King of Hell? Satan? Hades? Anubis? Brother Ju asked for 4 names in one breath. Judging from the identities of these 4 people, Feng Bujue knew where he would go after his death. He had thought about it a long time ago. Even if the so-called underworld did exist in this universe, he would definitely not go to heaven. But you are somewhat different. The voice did not answer Feng Bujua's question, but said to itself, I can't smell your fear and helplessness. It paused. Why is that? Ah, helplessness is not my style. Feng Bujue replied. When he said the second sentence, he realized that the moment the voice appeared, his hearing had already recovered. As for fear, forgive me for being powerless. The voice muttered. Fine, insignificant ant. What business do you have here? Air, where's this? Feng Bujue could only answer the question with a question because he really did not know how to answer. This is my prison. The voice replied. So who are you? Feng Bujue asked in a very impatient tone. It looked like he really did not like to ask the same question twice. Who am I? Who am I? The voice repeated, as if it was muttering to itself. I really can't remember. You don't remember who you are? Only remember that you're locked in a cage. Feng Bujue said casually. Yes, I've been imprisoned for too long. The tone of the voice became sorrowful. Although there are occasionally one or two lowly creatures that come here, as long as you stay in the same space with me for too long, you insignificant existences will be gradually and unconsciously devoured and absorbed by me. In the end, only endless darkness and loneliness accompanied me. Just based on this sentence, it's not strange that you were locked up. Feng Bujue said, I am very curious. Which Daluo golden immortal imprisoned you, who knows? The voice replied. A long, long time ago, I firmly remembered that name. Even after I forgot my own name, I did not forget the name of my enemy. I thought, even the ice and snow of 100,000 winters would not be able to cool my anger. Only by tasting the taste of revenge would my anger be appeased. However, in the end, I forgot. I forgot the other party's appearance, forgot the other party's name, and even forgot the reason why I was locked up here. The more Feng Bujue heard, the more annoyed he became. Fine, my friend who refuses to answer my questions, looks like you have nothing to tell me. You should leave, the voice said earnestly. If you stay here, it won't take long for you to be swallowed up. I really don't want to stay here for long, Feng Bujue said. But I can't even feel my own body now. How can I? You came here on your own, the voice interrupted. As long as you can remember why you are here, you can go back. That's why. I just don't know how I. Feng Bujue's words were at the tip of his tongue, but his mind buzzed. Yes, I used a skill, and then he immediately said to the voice, I say, Mr. Nameless Prisoner, the word demonization, does it sound familiar to you? Demonization. The other party heard this and was silent for a few seconds. Ha 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 ha. What followed was a burst of terrifying laughter. This reaction seems to mean that you know something, Feng Bujue said. I understand why you are here. After a while, the voice stopped laughing and said in a low voice, If you want to demonize, it's very easy. In the darkness, there was suddenly the sound of a giant creature breathing deeply. The next second, an unprecedented feeling of pain instantly swallowed Feng Bujue's consciousness. It was as if the flames from the deepest part of hell were roasting his soul. This feeling was obviously far beyond the limits of the game. Under normal circumstances, he would have fainted long ago. However, Feng Bujue was sober as he experienced every bit of bone-piercing and soul-eating torture. Time seemed to have stopped, but it also seemed to be eternal. After an unknown amount of time, Feng Bujue saw light again. The coolness of the water on his body made him feel as if he had been reborn. Everything just now was both real and illusory. It was hard to tell what was real and what was not. Only the pain of his soul burning was unforgettable at this time. Feng Bujue found himself still on the shelf, but his body was enveloped in a black ball of do qi. The black energy was like a flame that surged around his body. Even an expert like Passing Rain couldn't get close to him because of the invisible force. This is demonization, Feng Bujue said to himself. The look in his eyes changed. Passing Rain thought, is he getting serious? It's called the power of the demon god. It's well-deserved. Feng Bujue smirked and said with an evil smile, This transformation only lasts 3 minutes. I advise you to save the time to be amazed. Passing Rain kindly reminded him. Don't worry. Feng Buju interrupted her. 3 minutes is enough. When Passing Rain heard the word enough, she understood Brother Buju's meaning. She didn't waste any more time. She lightly tapped the ground and suddenly attacked. The sainthood blade slashed down. It looked like a slow and gentle movement, but it exploded with destructive power. The sword flashed, and the line was cut. The shelf that was as big as a cliff for players was cut off by this slash. The cut-off part slowly fell down like a landslide. But Feng Bujue, who jumped in the air and dodged the slash, still maintained a calm expression and said, not bad. Chapter 374. 50% of your sword, 70% of your luck, and you still have such power. Feng Buju muttered, looks like I wasn't even qualified to fight with you just now. As he spoke, he had already activated the body enhancement technique and used the Jeppo to accelerate. His body turned from solid to illusory as he pounced on Passing Rain. Passing Rain's eyes changed slightly, and her murderous aura became colder. She rotated the holy seal in her hand, and a sharp sword aura whizzed out. Feng Bujue did not show any weakness. He used a Rankyaku kick to meet the attack, and kicked out a black arc of light. With a shout, the two slashes collided in the air. The energy exploded, and the turbulence spread in all directions. Feng Bujue was in the air and was greatly affected. He was forced to retreat a few steps. After this move, he was obviously at a disadvantage. It's not over yet, Passing Rain said, and the long sword in her hand immediately moved again. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The sword aura was like layers of waves, continuously slashing. Passing Rain's sword was extremely fast. When the others saw it, the sword had turned into a shadow. As expected, Feng Bujue replied lazily and immediately used the Jeppo to stabilize his body. At the same time, he used dozens of Rankyaku kicks to meet the sword aura. At this time, the fire sprinklers on the ceiling had been turned off, but the humidity in the surroundings was still very high. The slashes from the two of them exploded in the air, sending out waves of dense air, creating a rare scene. Not good, more powerful than I thought. Feng Bujue thought to himself. Although on the surface, he acted like he was invincible, but in fact he knew best. After the transformation, his strength and speed were only 3 times his original. This level of improvement was actually not much different from the body enhancement technique. It was just that Descent of the War Demon also had the effect of tripling his survival value, as well as unlimited stamina and spiritual energy. Therefore, skills like the Rankyaku kick and the Jeppo with no cooldown time could be used at will. In addition, if he used the body enhancement technique now, the effect would be stacked, and his strength would be equivalent to 6 times his original state. However, even so, his strength was only about the same as Passing Rain's. Because, Soul's Eye. Let's talk about Feng Bujue first. His Soul's Eye was a continuous 0-time difference calculation. This ability seems to be somewhat similar to observation hockey, but they are 2 different things. 0-time difference calculation was not to predict the opponent's attack intent, but to calculate the most reasonable response that one could make with one's own strength at the moment when the attack had already occurred and to implement it accurately. The only problem with this ability was that prediction and calculation required a basis. Whether attacking or being attacked, the Soul's Eyes calculation was built on the basis of intelligence. For example, if you want to dodge a bullet, you have to at least have a concept of the bullet's flying speed and trajectory. You have to know the speed of sound, straight line. Otherwise, your calculation will be wrong, and your reaction will also be wrong. Using the battle between Brother Ju and Shiva as an example, the reason he was able to win so easily was because when his soul eye awakened, he had been fighting Shiva for a long time. Therefore, he had a very clear understanding of Shiva's physical skills, and the firing speed of his spiritual weapons. And the more accurate the information was, the more perfect the response would be. Using Little Red Riding Hood as an example, even though Feng Bujue did not fight her face-to-face, he could still construct a basic concept in his mind. For example, her punch is faster than a bullet, and one slap can turn me into a pancake. Based on this, using the souls to calculate the result of I rushed up to hit her, there would be die, 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 die. Anyway, there are thousands of ways to die. Brother Jew souls, I was more or less like this. Let's talk about like rain. Like heroine souls, I was extreme efficiency, which was instant use. This ability usually did not take effect, and there was no data that could be quantified, so the system could not include it in the combat effectiveness, which is why like rain was ranked outside the top 20. However, the effect of this souls, I was still excellent. When the player entered the state of extreme efficiency, all the flaws in the action would be corrected, and the consumption would be minimized. Here are a few more examples. Let's talk about running. Why can long-distance runners still stand after running 10,000 meters, but people like me can't get up halfway? Other than the hard conditions of muscle, weight, and lung capacity, the most important thing was the method. For the same distance, using a reasonable movement, rhythm, and breathing to run would definitely save stamina compared to a layman running blindly. Let's talk about breaking bricks. It was the same arm, but the skin wrapped around the bones and flesh. Why could someone break a brick with one palm, but I can only break the palm bone with one palm? It was the same reason. After arduous training, muscle memory would become a part of instinct, and the reflexes would increase by several times. When speed, strength, and skill all combine at one point, one could do things that normal people could not. Extreme efficiency was the ability to keep people in this state at all times. When this souls I was activated, like rain could exert her strength to the theoretical limit. The same action of swinging a sword, she could do it faster and stronger, but the consumption of stamina would be lower. Of course, such an overpowered method naturally had its weakness. Although this souls I did not consume any points in the game, it required the player's mental strength to bear it. Once the player lost focus, the effect could not be maintained. Comparing Brother Jew and like Rain Souls I, it could be seen that like Rain Souls I increased the player's strength more. She was like a bullet that could not be dodged. As long as she was strong enough, no matter how Fong Bujue calculated and adapted, he could not overcome the absolute gap in numbers. However, there was another variable at this moment, and that was Descent of the War Demon. The effect of this title skill was not only what was written in the skill description. Fong Bujue had already noticed that after demonizing, his realm was different. There was a joke, the life of a tofu seller, the heart of a prime minister. Fong Bujue was more or less like this. His realm was already at the level of a martial arts master, but his body was still at the level of a second-rate sect disciple. He could see like Rain's strength, but it was difficult to match her strength. However, an expert was an expert. In the blink of an eye, Fong Bujue's plan had succeeded, and he had a chance to win. Indeed, 3 minutes was enough. The mid-range slashes and sweeps were just probing moves by both sides. The real victory could be decided in 3 moves. In a split second, the black ball of battle energy in the air was covered in a red glow. Fong Bujue activated the body enhancement technique, and with the moon steps, he charged forward. This time, the speed and power of the attack were not something that could be forced back by sword chi. Seeing this, like Rain was as calm as before. She changed her movement technique, withdrawing her momentum to avoid the strong force, and the tip of her sword to block, attacking and defending. In one step, Fong Bujue used the momentum of charging downwards, his hands holding several death poker cards as he attacked. The golden light flashed, and the cards fell into the gap between life and death. It was extremely dangerous. Like Rain coldly snorted, her sword blossoming like a lotus, cutting the cards one by one. As they clashed, there was the sound of metal clashing. Fong Bujue took advantage of the situation to move forward, and once again, he was one breath away from like Rain. At this moment, the distance between the two was unprecedentedly close. They both knew each other's killing moves and also knew what the other was going to do. Southern Dipper Flying Dragon Fist was undoubtedly Fong Bujue's killing move. Under the effect of Descent of the War Demon and Body Enhancement technique, This was a well-deserved ultimate move. A normal scenario boss would not be able to survive this move. And like Rain's killing move was a sword move, 7 Clear Frost. The two used all their moves, pushing their skills, statuses, and souls to the limit. The sword and fist shadows intertwined, collided, and shattered in the air. In this frozen moment, the expression on the two's face was actually a smile. These two people, who were not normal in real life, seemed to have found some kind of tacit understanding, some kind of strange communication method that only they understood, and they were enjoying it. After a few seconds, the moves stopped, the fist and sword stopped, and the winner was decided. In the end, there was only one figure standing on top of the container. The other person had turned into white light and disappeared. Current quest completed. All main quests have been completed. You have completed the scenario. Automatic teleportation in 180 seconds. Hearing the system announcement, Feng Bujue gave a long sigh. He lowered his head to look at his bloodied hands. If not for the fact that I'm in demonized state, her sword skill would have directly interrupted my skill. Chapter 375. The scenario has been completed. Calculating reward. Obtained EXP, 70,000. Game coins, 100,000. Obtained equipment, none. Accepted missions, 1/3. Completed special and hidden missions, 0. Unlocked world building, none. Time of terror points increase, 0. Highest terror points, 0%. Average terror points, 0%. Your terror rating is Embodiment of Valor. Extra reward obtained. Please select later. Obtained skill points, 1. 950-inch additional bonus from skill points. EXP, 19500. Game coins, 100,000. Scenario cleared reward. Puzzle card, X2, calculation complete. Please continue. Before the countdown ended, Feng Bujue chose to return to the login lobby. This was because after the 3 minutes of descent of the war demon ended, his life points would be at 1%, and his stamina points and sorcery points would be at 0. Even if he stayed, he would not be able to do anything in those 180 seconds. From the calculation screen, the reward for this killing game was not that great. It was probably because he had only completed the main mission, so the EXP was not that great. Regarding the 2 side missions, the first one, join the classic camp and end the war, was naturally not going to be completed. When Musashi was creating the Blowfish Gladiator, Feng Bujue had reconsidered this problem. His speculation was that if he wanted to complete the side mission, it was best not to meet this NPC, the Prophet. Even if he did meet him, he should not say anything unnecessary. Then, the plot would not expand to the level of the 4 pillars of divinity, and the information that the players had would stop at the basic setting of Toy Story. Then, by following the other side mission, assist Jazz and Night Beat to investigate the Lego house, the plot would unfold step by step, and in the end, they would win the war. Of course, this kind of victory was probably just a show created by the system. After the players left, the Prophet would return everything to normal. However, there is no point in discussing that now. Since he did not return to report to Optimus Prime, the investigation mission was not completed. In any case, this bit of EXP plus 40% should be enough for me to reach level 30. Feng Bujue said, and clicked on the Accept option on the screen, responding to Xiao Tan's invitation to the conference room. He wasn't in a hurry to go to the storage room to get his reward. Since he had already decided to get the EXP, he could go later. Thus, he directly pressed the button for the conference room in the elevator operation area and walked out. Whoa, what are you doing? Are you going to sacrifice him to the heavens? As soon as Brother Ju entered the room, he saw Xiao Tan sitting at the conference table with crumbs all over his face. That's not bad. If you could fight in this space, you would be looking at a scene on the level of WWE, Xiao Tan said gloomily. You seem to be dissatisfied, Laughing Soul said from the side. No, Shouting quickly said, absolutely not. Feng Bujue took a few steps forward and whispered to Passing Rain. I don't know, Passing Rain replied. It's best if you don't ask about it. Feng Bujue turned around and sat down like nothing had happened. I'll go get my reward later, and I'll reach level 30. Shouldn't we consider trying the team's nightmare difficulty? Hey, you're changing the topic already. You don't care about what happened to me. Xiao Tan roared. What's there to ask? Feng Bujue said weakly. It's nothing more than saying or doing things that shouldn't be said. Guild leader is wise. Laughing Soul added as she glared at Xiao Tan. As a man, kneel down and apologize, and you should be able to get the girl's forgiveness, Feng Bujue continued. Don't apply your behavior to everyone. Xiao Tan said. Feng Bujue narrowed his dead fish eyes and slowly turned to Laughing Soul. You too. Look at how pitiful this kid is, and he's often bullied by you. If there's nothing wrong with his principles, just forgive him. Based on my observation of the two of you, you're a perfect match. One of you is on the receiving end, and the other is on the receiving end. With time, perhaps the two of you will end up together. Pa! A bag of chips flew out from Laughing Soul's hand and landed on Feng Bujue's face. I told you to stay out of this, Passing Rain said coldly. And you're trying to shift the hatred to someone else. I've been mocking people for decades, and I've never failed. Feng Bujue grabbed the chips from his face and shoved them into his mouth. You're bluffing again. Passing Rain shook her head and chuckled. Humph! Feng Bujue scoffed and used action to prove his point. He used less than a second to come up with his lines. He turned to Passing Rain and said, by the way, as a hardcore fan, don't you want to give birth to my child or something? Pa! Another bag of chips flew out from Passing Rain's hand and landed on Feng Bujue's face. Feng Bujue discussed the practice match with his teammates in the meeting room and then talked about other things. This time, he even shared the setting of Soul's Eye. Just like that, it was already midnight. They agreed to meet at the server in sleeping mode before going offline to take a shower. On the morning of April 24th at 12:45 a.m., Feng Bujue logged into the game again. This time, he logged in 10 minutes earlier to deal with some trivial matters so that his teammates would not have to wait for him again. The first thing he did was to claim the reward. There was no need to go into detail about what he did after entering the storage room. In conclusion, after obtaining 40% EXP from his current level and drawing 2 new puzzle cards, Feng Bujue's stats were as follows. Title: Pioneer of Darkness, Title Ability, Descent of the Ward, Demon EXP, 3980030000, Skill Points, 19450, Game Coins, 1765000, Mastery, General Ability C, Workmanship D, Sleuthing D, Fighting C, Marksmanship D, Medic E, Sorcery C, Summoning Inventory, 1/15 Mario's Wrench, Flashlight, Stool of the 18 Bronze Statues, Number 5, SCP, 500, 10/20, Anti-Gravity Gun, Miss Moxie's Bad Temper, Belle of Jean Gang, Persephone's Vacuum Cleaner, Life Points Recovery Potion, M, X2, Endless Grenade, Magazine, WJQ, 308 Military Shovel, Indestructible, Equipment, Jazz Shoes, Spiderweb Gloves, Death Poker, Sorcery Weapon, Echo Armor, Goblin Mask, Artemis's Embrace, Reproductive Alchemy Amplification Device. Storage, 6 out of 10 Puzzle Card, Monkey, Puzzle Card, Sunglasses, Puzzle Card, Strawberry, Puzzle Card, Leather Jacket, Puzzle Card, Motorcycle, Puzzle Card, Shotgun. Skills Column, 712, Not So Hasty Repair, Body Enhancement Technique, Ice Alchemist Persistence, Southern Dipper Flying Dragon Fist, Summon, Musashi Koganoi, Jeppo from level 30 onwards. The EXP cap had increased by another 0. It was now 3 million. In a way, this was good news for Feng Bujue. With his advantage of not feeling fear, the amount of EXP that he could gain with every level increased to a shocking amount. The other thing worth mentioning was the increase in his summoning mastery. Since he had repeatedly used TA during the battle for the cape, he had done more than 10 random summons. Therefore, his mastery of his mastery was already very high. Therefore, after summoning Musashi Kogensui twice, his mastery of this mastery had increased by 1 level. Currently, Feng Bujue's character mission, which was to use summoning skills and summon creatures 50 times, had a completion rate of 1,750. It looked like he would need at least half a month to complete this step. These few cards. Feng Bujue accepted the reward and was about to place the puzzle cards into the storage when he suddenly noticed something. He pulled out all the puzzle cards and opened the virtual menu before him. He selected the combine option. The system prompt immediately sounded, found a possible combination sequence. The window in front of him showed deck name T800 Terminator, consumes, puzzle card, sunglasses, puzzle card, leather jacket, puzzle card, motorcycle, and puzzle card, shotgun, to form a combination. A card set that requires 4 cards to form. Feng Bujue mumbled, "I smell the scent of perfect equipment. You have chosen to form the card set. T800, please confirm." As the 4 cards dissolved into white light and reassembled, a card the size of a tarot card appeared in Feng Bujue's hand. The card was printed with the image of a tough guy wearing sunglasses, riding a motorcycle, wearing a leather jacket, and holding a gun. It was in an ink painting style. It was very out of place, the system said again. "The card set has been formed. Would you like to exchange it for equipment?" After selecting yes, a column of white light appeared on the other side of the storage room. It quickly turned into a glass column for receiving the reward. When Feng Bujue got closer, the equipment had already been formed. It looked like a strange machine, about the size of an accordion. The structure was very complicated. There was an entrance on one side, but there was no exit on the other side, only a circular convex lens. There was only a lever next to the machine, and there were no other parts that could be adjusted. He was already feeling uneasy, so he quickly took out the item and examined it. Name, 0 magic disintegrator type. Tool, quality, trash, function, creates trash, special effect. There's a certain chance of creating a legendary item. At least 3 pieces of equipment with quality not lower than excellent are required to activate. Remark, this is a magical item invented by the famous wizard, losing_mind. According to his description, this device can combine several items with magical energy to create a more valuable and powerful item. But the reality was very bad. After Mind destroyed the hundreds of items that he borrowed, this thing only spat out a pile of scrap metal. Thus, Murd was beaten up by his furious colleagues and exiled from the Adepts Association for good. And this disintegrator was labeled as trash and locked in the storage room. Chapter 376. This volume is a story that takes place between Sword Discourse and Chonglin, and I am the writer. Why did he choose to write it now? Actually, there was no particular reason. If there was a reason, it was because there were too many things in his mind that he wanted to write, and he had put this overly shameless scenario aside. Since Feng Bujue did not use any item or skill in this scenario, it did not matter where he added this part. Then let's begin. Welcome to Thriller Paradise. A familiar voice said with a laugh. Download complete. You're currently playing single-player survival mode, Nightmare. A scenario introduction is provided in this mode, and there's a chance of triggering hidden side missions and special world building. Reward for clearing the scenario. Gain 80% extra EXP from clearing the scenario. Playing the scenario introduction soon. After that, the game will start. The screen lit up, and the main character in the cinematic was driving a car down a mountain road. The road before him was uneven, and the railings by the side of the road were obviously old. Every once in a while, there would be a gap without railings. It was unclear whether it was due to an accident or not. Looking at the scenery in the distance through the windshield, he could see the mountains, deep valleys, and lush forests. This was obviously a remote area with few people around. Next to the road was a cliff, and there were many strange trees growing all over the place. Some of the branches even reached down the road, and it was a dangerous place. Just a few seconds later, Feng Bujue could guess what was going to happen next. Not long after that, the system audio began. You are a famous detective with a strange personality. One afternoon in October, you decided to go on a long journey. You drove the cheap rented car, drove across the highway, left the city, passed through the mountains, crossed the canyons, and followed the highway into the distance. In those strange and barren lands, you search for the illusion of freedom until you came to this place. This is an ancient land. The footsteps of civilization seem to have refused to stay here. They left behind a few footprints before leaving. Many years ago, this place was once thought to be habitable. French Canadians have been here, Italians have been here, Poles have been here, but they have all left. The reason could be nothing more than seeing, hearing, or encountering something. It could also be imagining something. This is obviously not a place that can bring people good dreams. The narration came to an abrupt end and was replaced by the sound of brakes. As Fong Bujua expected, the car in the opening cinematic suddenly skidded, rushed out of the gap between the guardrails, and rolled down the hill. Accompanied by the rumbling sound of the rolling car, the scene in front of his eyes first trembled violently, then turned upside down, and finally, he was blinded by darkness. Thankfully, several seconds later, Fong Bujue regained the ability to move, and the scenario officially began. As soon as he opened his eyes, Brother Ju felt a little uncomfortable. At this moment, the car he was sitting in was with the chassis facing up, and his body was fastened to the driver's seat by the seatbelt. He didn't know if the car would leak oil and explode, but he definitely couldn't stay inside forever. Fong Bujue immediately tried to undo the seatbelt, and to his surprise, the seatbelt was easily undone. The quality was impressive. He used his hands to support his upside-down body and looked left and right. He realized that the windshield was completely shattered, so he decided to get out from there. Therefore, he lowered his head so that all his weight was on his shoulders. Then, he bent his body like a prawn and let his feet reach out from the front while his body followed in a backward roll. The man was quite flexible, and he was able to get out of the car in no time. After he landed on the muddy ground, Fong Bujue didn't hurry to leave the overturned car. The first thing that came to his mind was to search the car to see if there were any items that he could use. But at that moment, there was a flash of light and the exterior of the fuel tank caught fire. Seeing this, Fong Bujue turned around and ran forward without hesitation. 2 seconds later, there was an explosion, and it sent Brother Ju, who was running forward, flying several meters before he landed on his face. "I really can't let my guard down in nightmare mode," Fong Bujue grumbled. "This kind of near-death situation only gives me 2 seconds to react." He stood up and patted the dust off his body. Looking at the fire, he knew that there was nothing left for him to take from the car. Important reminder: you are unable to use any items brought in from outside the scenario in this scenario. Your inventory is locked. Your skill tab is locked. Before leaving the scenario, your attire will be temporarily changed to match your character's attire, and your physical fitness will be adjusted to match your physical fitness. Fong Bujue was startled when he heard the system announcement. Even though he had noticed that his attire had changed into a casual black suit, he hadn't noticed the changes to his inventory and skill tab. When he heard the announcement, he opened the game menu and saw that his items and skills had indeed been locked. Sigh. This system sure has the style of the National Development and Reform Commission. It only needs to send out a notice to do something. Fong Bujue grumbled as he accepted this setting. Then he lifted his head out of habit and scanned his surroundings. Even though the valley was filled with tall trees, the afternoon sun still managed to shine through. He looked around and didn't see any obvious threat. Perhaps due to the system's influence, even the fire from the car that had exploded did not spread. It only burned on the body of the car, and it looked like it would be extinguished once the car was charred. Just as Fong Bujue prepared to move out to explore, the main mission notification arrived. Main mission triggered. Use the 33 chapters to complete the scenario. Under this mission, the submission for the other main mission appeared. Find and reach the Lovecraft family's mansion in the valley. Oh, is that so? Fong Bujue chuckled coldly. This is a rare special chapter, and it's indeed not a good idea to end it with just a few chapters. In that case, let me handle the 33 chapters. Normally, a super simple case that could be closed with only 5 chapters. A clumsy killer, a hidden room full of loopholes, an obvious motive. No matter what, the famous detective had to handle the 33 chapters. Crazy theories kept popping up, and the number of suspects kept increasing. Could the real killer be brought to justice? And now, this was only the first chapter. Chapter 377. Fong Bujue wandered around the wreckage for a while, but he could not figure out a way to climb up the cliff, so he had to find another route. By then, Brother Ju had lost his superhuman skills, his supernatural equipment, and even the most basic survival tool. As a normal person, it was very dangerous for him to be stuck in a jungle like this. Fong Bujue did not know if there were other cruel rules in this scenario, like the players had to eat and drink, or else they would starve to death. By the way, when Fong Bujue played this scenario, he was in sleeping mode. If there was such a setting, with his years of experience watching Man vs. Wild, Brother Ju would at most live a day or two longer than a normal person. In the end, I can only move forward blindly based on my instincts. Fong Bujue mumbled to himself as he walked through the forest. He had no choice. With his current physical ability, climbing up a tree to take a look was as difficult as climbing the sky. Even if he did manage to climb up, it was very dangerous to poke his head out from the canopy. He did not have any protective gear on him, and if he slipped, he might die. However, things progressed more smoothly than he expected. After 20 minutes of difficult trekking, Fong Bujue saw a small stream appear before his eyes. Looking up, the forest on the other side of the stream was much sparser, and there was a small path between the trees. Brother Ju walked to the stream and looked around. After confirming that there were no beasts nearby, he squatted down to wash his face and take a few sips of water. From the dryness in his throat and the obvious tiredness, his role in this scenario required him to eat, drink, and rest. However, he did not need to go to the toilet because he could not take off his pants. After rehydrating and taking a short rest, Fong Bujue resumed his journey. Even though he had not run into any more danger after the car explosion, his cautious personality and fear of nightmare mode still made Fong Bujue pay attention to every step he took. Therefore, he was still very careful as he waded through the creek, which was only knee-deep and less than 5 meters wide. When he reached the opposite shore, he used the hem of his suit to dry his feet, put on his shoes and socks, and then walked along the path. From the reflection in the water, I still look like myself. While he was moving, his mind was also thinking nonstop. All the pockets on his body are empty, and the parts that could be checked inside and out don't have any embroidery or insignia. So, what's the name of this famous detective? As he pondered, the path beneath his feet became clearer and clearer. However, the surrounding terrain became steeper and steeper. When he looked back, the forest behind him was already below his current height. Just like that, he walked for another half an hour. After passing through a pine forest, the surrounding terrain leveled out. Not long after, a road appeared in front of them. Fong Bujue took a few quick steps and came to the main road. Looking at the electric poles on the side of the road, he felt an indescribable sense of familiarity. If there were a few small advertisements on the electric poles, it would be even more intimate. In fact, he had taken a big detour and had only returned to the height of the highway from the bottom of the valley. Woo! Not long after he walked along the road, he heard the sound of a car driving in the distance. Fong Bujue looked back and saw a rather flashy red convertible sports car driving toward him. He did not waste time and stood directly in the middle of the road. He spread his legs, raised his hands, and made a pose. It was as if he was saying, "If you don't let me ride, just kill me. Hey, help me." As the car drove closer, Fong Bujue waved his arms and shouted. There was a middle-aged couple sitting in the car. They were both Caucasians. Whether it was their clothes or the car they were driving, they were all mid-20th century models. If someone stopped a car in such a remote place, the other party would naturally have some scruples. However, after taking a closer look, the person who stopped the car was thin and unarmed. Although his clothes were dirty, he was dressed like a decent person. Plus, he was shouting help loudly. It seemed like he was really in some kind of trouble. Therefore, the sports car slowly slowed down and stopped by the side of the road. The man in the driver's seat said to his wife, "Stay in the car, Carol." "Be careful, Dennis," his wife reminded him. Dennis opened the door and got out. He walked to Fong Bujue about 2 meters away and said, "Sir, what happened?" Fong Bujue sized up the man in front of him. He was about 1.9 meters tall and was about 40 years old. He had a burly body, brown hair, blue eyes, and a small mustache. He wore a beige short-sleeved t-shirt and a pair of white trousers. The leather shoes on his feet were shiny. A blue sweater was draped over his shoulders, and the sleeves were tied in a knot in front of his chest. This way of dressing was already outdated in Fong Bujue's era, so he was even more certain that this script was set in the 20th century. Yes, sir. I was in a car accident," Fong Bujue replied. "What? Car accident?" Dennis looked at Fong Bujue. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," Fong Bujue said. "It's just that my car was wrecked and rolled down the road. I walked for about an hour before I climbed up from the bottom of the valley and found this road." He tried to reveal as much information as possible to dispel the other's doubts and gain his trust. "Please forgive me for standing in the middle of the road, but I really do need someone to give me a ride." "I see." Dennis seemed to have let down his guard and took a step closer. "Don't worry, buddy. I'm happy to help." "Thank you so much," Fong Bujue said. The way he spoke then was very polite and normal. Dennis led Fong Bujue to the car and pointed at the woman in the car. "This is my wife, Carol." He then turned his face to his wife and used his hand to point at Fong Bujue. "And this is Fong Bujue." Fong Bujue said his real name to test the NPC's reaction. "This is Mr. Fong. He was in a car accident and wanted to hitch a ride." Dennis continued naturally. It looked like the system had corrected the effect of name and appearance on the NPC. "Oh, that's too bad. Are you hurt?" Carol asked. The lady sitting in the car was wearing a red woolen coat. She had blue eyes and black hair. She could not be called beautiful, and the contours of her face were slightly strange. Although she was wearing heavy makeup, the years had not been kind to this 40-year-old woman. The thick foundation could not cover all the wrinkles. "I'm fine. Thank you for your concern, madam," Fong Bujue replied as he quickly got into the back seat. Even if the other party wanted to change his mind, it was too late. It was impossible to drive this guy out of the car. "Mr. Fong." Dennis got into the driver's seat and turned around. "My wife and I are going to a villa in the mountains to attend a family gathering. We're not far from our destination. If you don't mind, come with us to the villa first. There's a phone there. We can inform your family or friends to pick you up." "Thank you so much," Fong Bujue said. "I haven't asked your name yet." "Lovecraft," Dennis answered and started the engine. Dennis Lovecraft. Chapter 378. Dennis drove while talking to Fong Bujue in the back seat. After all, it was impossible for him to let his guard down completely since he had only met a stranger for less than 5 minutes. Therefore, this kind of communication was also a form of probing. Due to the limited information he had, Fong Bujue obviously felt powerless during the conversation. This was because he knew nothing about the year and location of the script. Also, he couldn't tell him anything about himself, such as his birthday, home address, and whether he had any relatives. Fortunately, Brother Jew was very quick-witted. Shortly after the conversation began, he said, "I might have a slight concussion during the car accident. My memory seems to have been affected." With this sentence as a foundation, if he was asked a question, he could directly answer, "Sorry, I can't remember." Then he would put his hand on his forehead and pretend to be in pain. Therefore, during this short journey, Fong Bujue only revealed 3 pieces of information: name, gender, and occupation. On the other hand, Dennis and his wife got a lot of information from him. First of all, the year of the script was 1985. The location was a small European country called Aseri, which sounded fictional. Secondly, Mr. Dennis Lovecraft, who exuded a tall, rich, and handsome temperament, was a businessman who mainly dealt in industrial pipelines. And his wife, Carol, although now took her husband's surname. From the conversation between the two, it could be inferred that the woman's background was quite prominent, much higher than the man's. Just this point alone made Fong Bujue have a lot of conjectures. A handsome and tall man married a wife who was not very beautiful, but had a strong background. Generally, When this kind of setting appeared in detective novels, the probability of a murder was very high. For example, the man had a mistress outside, or he didn't have one yet, and was preparing to take the woman's property and find another one. These were very convincing motives for murder. In addition, after some observation, Fong Bujue found that the couple seemed to be a little uneasy about the future of the trip. It seemed that the so-called family gathering was not a normal meeting between relatives and friends. There must be more to it. Look, we're here. Dennis's voice pulled Fong Bujue back from his thoughts. After the car drove around a corner, a mountain villa appeared in Fong Bujue's sight. The road in front of them branched off and led to the villa's driveway. Dennis drove in and came to the front door of the villa. He didn't get out of the car, but only pressed the car horn twice. Soon, a man in a traditional black tuxedo opened the door and walked out. This person looked to be about 60 years old, and his hair was already white. However, his hairstyle was still meticulously combed, and his back was also straight. "Oh, so it's young Master Dennis. Welcome back," the man said and came forward to welcome him. There was a slight delay on the way. "Are you okay?" "Henderson," Dennis replied. "Don't worry, young master. My body is still very strong." As Henderson spoke, he came to the side of the car and opened the door for the lady. "Hello, Miss Carol." "Thank you, Henderson." Carol got out of the car. Dennis also got out of the car and saw Henderson looking at Fong Bujue with a puzzled expression. "Oh, let me introduce you," Dennis said. "This is the housekeeper, Mr. Henderson. This is Mr. Fong Bujue." "Hello. Nice to meet you." Fong Bujue greeted him politely. Mr. Fong met with an accident on the mountain road. He lost his car and luggage. Fortunately, he's fine. Dennis explained, "If it's convenient, please ask Olivia, the maid, to prepare a guest room and a set of clean and fitting clothes for him." "Yes, young master, I'll do it right away." When Henderson agreed, he had already taken out 2 large suitcases from the trunk of the car. He panted heavily and turned to go into the house. "Thank you so much for your trouble, Mr. Lovecraft." Fong Bujue was still very polite on the surface, but he was thinking in his heart, 2 middle-aged men watching an old man carry such heavy luggage, but they didn't say anything and seemed to be used to it. Maybe this could become a potential motive for murder. Not at all. "Since you're here, you're a guest," Dennis replied. "This is how we treat our guests." As they were talking, a short man in a white shirt and overalls walked out. He was in his early 40s, had a beard, and his face was rosy. He looked very energetic. "Young Master Dennis, housekeeper Henderson asked me to park the car in the garage for you." Okay." Dennis casually handed the car keys to the man and turned to Fong Bujue. "Oh, this is Gardner Barton." He paused for a moment and continued. "Please follow me into the house, Mr. Fong." Fong Bujue responded and followed Dennis and his wife into the villa. Current mission completed. Main mission updated. The system notification sounded at this moment, but Fong Bujue wasn't in a hurry to check the menu. After entering the house, he naturally observed the surrounding environment first. The foyer on the first floor was very spacious. The furniture was neatly arranged, and the wallpaper and furnishings were basically cool colors, which seemed to hint at the owner's personality. Above his head was the oak ceiling, which was extremely high. Under his feet was also a wooden floor, which was covered with a messy pattern of gold silk carpet. The windows were all made of Venetian glass, and the window frames were painted green-gray. Looking forward, 7 to 8 meters away, was the staircase leading to the second floor. At this moment, a beautiful woman happened to be slowly walking down the stairs. She looked to be at most in her 30s, and she was wearing a green low-cut dress. She looked charming, and her skin was as white as snow. Her voluptuous upper body was on the verge of popping out, but her waist was painfully thin. "Dennis, Carol." The beautiful woman warmly greeted Dennis and his wife. "Oh, how are you?" She walked over and gave the 2 of them a ceremonial hug. "Oh, Odetta, I'm so happy to see you," replied Carol. Although she said that, and her tone was very sincere, Fong Bujue didn't see the slightest bit of happiness in her eyes. Dennis said in a neutral tone, "How's father's health?" Odetta's expression suddenly dimmed. This I'll let Dr. Powell tell you later. She seemed to want to change the topic, so her gaze fell on Fong Bujue, and she asked, "This is..." Dennis then briefly told Odetta about Fong Bujue. It was worth noting that when he introduced Odetta to Fong Bujue, he used the words, "my father's third wife." Chapter 379. When Brother Ju heard what Dennis had to say, his mind raced. Combining the conversation and expressions of the three NPCs, he instantly came up with 17 or 18 hypotheses for the murder case. Let's not talk about which madam's mother you are. Judging from your age, your father should be in his 60s or 70s, but your stepmother is quite young, Fong Bujue said. That Dr. Powell is the family doctor here, right? Looks like your father's health isn't too good. I've only been in the house for 5 minutes, and I'm already faced with the foreshadowing of a murder and an inheritance fight. The housekeeper, gardener maid, they're either potential suspects or witnesses. Young master, the guest room is ready. At this time, a burly red-haired auntie came into the hall. While she spoke to Dennis, she also nodded at the other two ladies. Mr. Fong, I think you must be exhausted. Why don't you follow Oliver to the guest room first? Dennis said, all the guest rooms here have bathrooms. You can take a shower and rest. If you think of how to contact your family or have any other requests, you can ask Henderson for help. Just treat this as your own home. He paused for a moment. Forgive me, but I still have some trivial matters to attend to, so I can't accompany you. No. I'm sorry for disturbing you, Fong Bujue quickly said. Thank you for everything you've done for me. After a few words of greeting, Fong Bujue bade farewell to the three hosts and followed the maid into the corridor on the first floor. Not long after, they came to a guest room on the west side of the villa. Auntie Oliver brought them in and went to do something else. Fong Bujue remained alert. After closing the door, the first thing he did was to search the entire guest room. After confirming that the area was safe, he let out a long sigh of relief and laid down on the soft bed. Phew! Finally, I can take a breather, he said softly. To Fong Bujue, it wasn't difficult for him to pretend to be refined, humble, and polite. It was just very tiring. All right, let's take a look at the mission first. He immediately opened the game menu to check. Find and arrive at the Lovecraft family mansion in the valley. The next mission was stay in the mansion and wait for the case to happen. That's a good task. Fong Bujue smiled. In other words, I don't have to do anything. He rested for about half an hour. Lying on the bed, he organized the information that he already knew. Then, he sat up and looked at the clean clothes on the table. Speaking of which, how do I change my clothes? This was indeed a difficult problem. The game did not allow him to strip naked. I can only use the excuse of because I was too tired, I fell asleep directly on the bed, so I didn't take a shower. Even Fong Bujue felt that this excuse was as far-fetched as a mild concussion. He thought for a while and muttered, I can take off the outer suit, but not the trousers and shirt. How about I take off the jacket, roll up the trousers, and clean it up a little with water. Then, I'll change into this clean jacket. This method seemed more reliable than the previous one. Thinking of this, he reached out to take the clean suit, but he did not expect to trigger a system notification. Consume this item to reset your appearance. Along with the voice message, a window popped up in front of him. It said, do you want to consume it now? Whoa, is this the legendary one-click outfit change? Fong Bujue hesitated for a few seconds before choosing yes. Suddenly, there was a flash of white light, and he looked like a new person. Not only did his clothes change into a clean suit, but even the stains on his skin and the smell of sweat on his body disappeared. The dirty clothes he was wearing appeared on the table, neatly folded. How convenient, Fong Bujue said then. What should I do now? Should I go and peek at the third ant taking a shower? Beep, beep, beep. The honk of a car horn interrupted his train of thought. As soon as the sound was heard, Fong Bujue walked quickly to the window, opened the curtains slightly with his hand, and looked outside following the sound. The guest room he was in just happened to have a diagonal view of the villa's main entrance. At that moment, he saw an off-road Jeep drive to the front of the villa, and a man in a black leather jacket stepped out of the car. The man was about 1.8 meters tall, in his early 30s, blonde hair, a cigarette in his mouth, permed hair, and a pair of sunglasses. He had the demeanor of a biker, but he didn't ride a motorcycle. "Huh, Henderson. Old man, how are you?" When the man saw the old butler, he came forward and gave him a bear hug. "Ha, Master Jack, welcome back." Henderson greeted him with a smile. Jack was straightforward, and he didn't even pull out the car key. Instead, he carried a travel bag on the back seat of the Jeep on his shoulder and ran into the house. "This guy is Dennis's brother," Phone Bujua said. "Looking at his age, he is definitely not Odetta's child. I don't know if he and Dennis are biological brothers or half-brothers." He left the window, sat back on the bed, and thought, speaking of which, the current third wife looks no more than 35 years old. No matter how you look at it, she should be about 30 years older than the master of this family. Unless she married into the Lovecraft family 10 years ago, it is basically impossible for her to have children. Bang! Suddenly, without any warning, a rather obvious gunshot was heard, and it sounded like it came from somewhere on the second floor. It did just like that? Very good. Phone Bujua's reaction after hearing the gunshot was also different from normal people. He first sighed, then stood up and stretched. Then, he calmly walked out of the room and walked toward the location of the gunshot. When he was in school, whenever he heard the announcement, "Student Phone Bujua, please report to the principal's office immediately," Brother Jew had this kind of reaction. It felt like, I knew something bad was about to happen or had happened, but I would still deal with it calmly. When he walked through the corridor to the stairs, Phone Bujua happened to meet the butler, Henderson, who ran in from the main door. The old man heard the gunshot outside the house and hurried back. "It seems to be on the second floor." Phone Bujua calmly raised his finger and pointed upward and said to Henderson, "It came from that direction." "Oh, God!" Henderson exclaimed. "It's the master's room," he said as he ran up the stairs. Brother Jew did not see anything that did not make sense from the man's actions. So, he quietly followed Henderson and ran to the second floor. Chapter 380. Phone Bujua followed the butler upstairs. When he passed the corner of the stairs, he found a travel bag thrown on the side of the aisle. It must have been Master Jack who threw it after hearing the gunshot. After more than a minute, Phone Bujua followed Henderson to the door of the master bedroom on the second floor. The door was open, and there was a fierce argument in the room. One of the voices was obviously Dennis. He shouted emotionally, "This has nothing to do with you, Jack." Jack was not to be outdone as he replied, "Hey, I'm not a 3-year-old child. I have the right to know what you said to Dad to make him angry." "Enough." A third voice sounded. It was a voice unfamiliar to Phone Bujua. It sounded deep and powerful. "Shut up." Bang, there was another gunshot. Judging from the sound, it was from the same gun. At this time, Odetta and Carol had also heard the sound and appeared from the other end of the corridor. "Oh my God, what happened?" Odetta said with a worried look. Carol's expression was similar to hers. She looked uneasy. These are not the only people who were attracted by the gunshot. The maid Oliver, the gardener Barton, and another tall and thin man in his 50s with glasses that Phone Bujua had never seen before also appeared in the corridor. Everyone's expression was one of bewilderment. They were all saying things like, "What's going on?" or "I heard gunshots." "Master, 2 young masters." Butler Henderson was the first to step into the door. No one in the room answered his words, and the scene fell into an oppressive silence. Phone Bujua didn't care about that. He quietly approached and looked into the room over Henderson's shoulder. In the bedroom in front of him, there were a total of 3 people. In addition to Dennis and Jack, the third person was naturally the master of the Lovecraft family. In the eyes of ordinary people, Dennis's appearance was tall and heroic, but compared to his father, his temperament and aura were a lot worse. The appearance of this patriarch was unforgettable. His face was firm, his outline distinct, and his gaze was cold, indifferent, and composed. Every single move he made revealed the dignified aura of a superior, and it gave others an otherworldly, indisputable, and inviolable feeling. "Well, No wonder you can marry a wife who is 30 years younger than you. You really have style. Feng Bujue. His eyes quickly wandered, observing every detail in the bedroom. At this time, the master was sitting on a sofa, wearing a crimson nightgown. In his hand was a Colt revolver with a silver wooden handle. It was a classic six-shot model, and smoke was still coming out of the muzzle. Dennis and Jack were standing 2 meters away from him, and they didn't look like they were injured. TSK. So it's just a demonstration of shooting at the ceiling. Feng Bujue, his mentality of wanting to see the world in chaos was not desirable. So this is the purpose of adding a question mark after the title of the previous chapter. Colston, the tall and thin man in the corridor, hurried over. Sorry, excuse me. He squeezed past Feng Bujue and Henderson, walked into the bedroom, and said to the master, Colston, are you crazy? Put the gun down. What if you hurt someone? Yeah, if I commit a crime in front of so many people, how can I stay in chapter 33? Feng Bujue complained in his mind. Colston put the gun on the small table next to the chair, took a deep breath, then looked up at his 2 sons and said, You 2 go out first. Dennis and Jack looked at each other, but the 2 of them didn't say anything. They just followed their father's order and left the room. Powell, you stay. I have something to say to you, Colston said to the tall and thin man. It seemed that he was the Dr. Powell that Odetta mentioned earlier. After the 2 sons left the room, Colston motioned for Powell to close the door. The atmosphere in the corridor was a bit awkward. Obviously, everyone had their own speculations about what Dennis and Colston had said earlier. Therefore, everyone's eyes were telling a special emotion. Honey, are you okay? Carol came up and held her husband's hand with concern. Don't worry, honey. Dennis was very good at hiding his true emotions. After he walked out of the door, his expression had returned to normal. Father is just angry because of some trivial things. You know, in the past few years, his temper has been getting worse and worse. I think it might have something to do with his illness. Huh, you make it sound like it's true. Jack sneered and turned to leave. Is that how you talk to your brother? Dennis said loudly. You should be glad that I don't have a gun like that. Jack's words were very frivolous. Perhaps he didn't think much of it, but the meaning behind this joke was very dangerous. In Feng Bujue's opinion, if Dennis was killed soon, this line would be enough to flag him as a key suspect. After Jack finished speaking, he went in the direction of the stairs. He was probably going back to get the luggage he had left behind. Dennis snorted and didn't call him again. As an outsider, Feng Bujue was naturally not in a position to interrupt. He just quietly observed everyone's reaction. Butler Henderson, Gardner Barton, Maid Olivia, Madame Carroll, and Madame Odetta. In Brother Jew's opinion, all of them were hiding some unspeakable secrets. Okay, let's disperse. There's nothing to see, it's fine. Dennis loudly asked everyone to leave. As he spoke, he noticed that Feng Bujue was also present, so he stepped forward and said, Oh, Mr. Feng, I'm so sorry. I made a fool of myself in front of you. My father used to be a soldier, and that gun is a souvenir from the war. Feng Bujue was not interested in this perfunctory explanation. He directly replied in a very open-minded tone, Oh, it's okay. I'm used to this kind of scene. I'm a detective after all. This sentence seemed to have frozen the air. Those who were leaving obviously paused. Even Jack, who had walked far away, turned back to look at Feng Bujue. The expressions on the faces of Dennis and his wife also changed slightly. Although they chatted with Feng Bujue in the car, the latter had mentioned this, Dennis and Carol didn't take it seriously at the time. A car accident survivor with a slight concussion who couldn't even tell his birthday or the year he lived in. If he said that he was an astronaut, who would believe him? However, at this moment, Feng Bujue had already tidied up and changed into a clean outfit. Looking at him from top to bottom, this person's eyes were bright, his body was fine, his speech was clear, and his words were well chosen. It seemed that he might really be a detective. Chapter 381. In the next hour, Feng Bujue returned to his room and continued to wait for the case that he did not know when it would happen. This scenario was the easiest nightmare scenario that he had played so far. Even though his character's abilities were completely limited, other than the car explosion at the beginning, he had not encountered any obvious death flags. Plus, the NPC's attitude was relatively friendly, and they all treated him with respect. As long as Brother Jew himself did not do anything stupid, such as exposing his true nature, there should not be anything that could threaten his safety. So, the difficulty is focused on the setting of Chapter 33. Fong Bujue lay on the soft and comfortable bed. He put his hands behind his head and said lazily, Normally, whether it is a mystery novel or a detective movie, the plot do not use more than a quarter. Then, before Chapter 8, something will happen no matter what. Just as he was talking nonsense, in the corridor outside the door, there was the sound of light footsteps. Fong Bujue immediately sat up alertly and leaned his ear to listen. Brother Jew had done some non-systematic but very practical research on the sound of footsteps. Different height, gender, occupation, clothing, living habits, and even personality would be reflected in the sound of a person's footsteps. At this time, he knew that the person was the short gardener, Barton. Knock, knock. Barton gently knocked on Fong Bujue's door. Who is it? Actually, Fong Bujue had been standing behind the door for a long time, and he knew who the visitor was, but he still had to pretend to ask the question. I am a gardener. My name is Barton. Barton, who was outside the door, replied, We have met outside. Do you remember? Fong Bujue opened the door and greeted the man calmly. Of course. Nice to meet you, Mr. Barton. How can I help you? Barton looked around the corridor very exaggeratedly, then lowered his voice and asked, Mr. Fong, are you really a detective? Yes. Fong Bujue's tone was very normal and revealed a convincing confidence. As he spoke, he turned sideways and said, I think you have something to say to me. Please come in. Barton hesitated for a second and turned his head again. After confirming that no one was watching, he stepped through the door. Sorry to disturb you. Fong Bujue closed the door and bolted it. Then, he turned around naturally and moved a chair for Barton. Please sit down, Mr. Barton. Thank you. Barton took the chair, but he did not sit down immediately. He was waiting for his master to sit down first. Fong Bujue took in all these details. He did not say anything. He moved another chair and sat down directly. Seeing this scene, Barton also sat down. Through a few simple sentences and actions, Fong Bujue managed to create the impression that this detective was very easygoing. There is something very important that I feel the need to tell you. As soon as Barton opened his mouth, he looked very nervous. But before I tell you this, there are some things about myself that I want to confess to you first. I'm all ears, Fong Bujue said. Barton nodded, as if he had made a great decision, and said, Used to be a burglar who stole doors and picked locks. Used to be? Fong Bujue continued. Yes, of course. I'm not a burglar anymore. Barton explained, Actually, when I was young, I had a bright future. Sigh, let's not talk about it. Anyway, when I was 30, I spent 2 years in prison in Pentonville. It was really terrible there. Even in the winter, the prisoners only had a rough linen work uniform on their bodies. The food they ate was cooked with gray beetle beans, no oil, and there was endless work every day. One night, I was cold and hungry, and I was drenched in the rain. I thought I was going to freeze to death. Get to the point, Mr. Barton, Fong Bujue said. Please get to the point. I'm sorry, Barton said. In short, that experience had a great impact on me. Since then, I've turned over a new leaf. Then, is there any connection between this and the very important thing that you're going to tell me? Fong Bujue asked. I just hope that you can trust me fully, Barton replied. Fong Bujue muttered. That's strange. How will describing your criminal record help you gain my trust? Without waiting for Barton to respond, he continued. Presumably, the very important thing that you're going to tell me will be very detrimental to someone in this house, right? How do you know? Barton did not finish his sentence. Fong Bujue interrupted. This is obvious. Person A speaks ill of Person B. If Person B wants to deny it, the best way is to attack Person A and reduce the credibility of his words. Do you really believe what the thief said? That's probably how it feels. He scratched his head. You know very well that others will use your disgraceful experience to talk about things. So, you might as well tell me first. Oh, sir, you're amazing. You really are a great detective, Barton said with his eyes wide open. Humph, you flatter me, Fong Bouguer replied, humbly, with an expression of uncontrollable pleasure. A few seconds later, he said, Please rest assured and tell me the truth, Mr. Barton. I don't have any prejudice against you. Whether it's true or not, I have my own judgment. Barton nodded, swallowed, and said, What I want to tell you is... He lowered his voice and said with a serious expression, Young Master Dennis might want to murder Mrs. Odetta, based on... Fong Bouguer understood that the gardener must have seen or heard something. Previously, when young Master Dennis and old Master Colston were arguing in the room, I accidentally heard a few words. Barton said, Let me guess. Fong Bouguer raised his hands, 2 fingers each, and made quotation marks. You happened to be trimming branches and leaves on a tree outside that room, right? Barton blinked awkwardly. Yes. All right, please continue. What do they say? Fong Bouguer shrugged, indicating for Barton to continue. Barton continued. I only heard a few words. Young Master Dennis seemed to be persuading Old Master to remove Mrs. Odetta's name from the will. Old Master refused? Fong Bouguer asked. Barton nodded. Yes, and he was furious. He even scolded young Master. His expression darkened. At that moment, young Master Dennis said, Chapter 382. Young Master Dennis shouted excitedly to Master, Everyone can see that the woman married you to steal our family's property. You're the only one who's still in the dark. You're old and muddle-headed, and you've been charmed by her. I won't let this happen. If you don't want to erase her name from the will, I'll find another way. Barton imitated the tone of the person involved and repeated. After young Master said this, Master roared loudly, and then there was a gunshot. At that time, I was so scared that I almost fell from the tree. Fortunately, I was close to the tree trunk, so I hugged and slid down in time. After that, I ran into the house and met everyone in the corridor on the 2nd floor. Barton looked like an honest man. He was not shrewd, but he was a little gossipy. It was human nature for the servants of wealthy families to be interested in the master's family's dirty laundry. Fong Bouguer thought that Barton's description might have been exaggerated, but the basic meaning should not be too different. Therefore, Brother Jew asked tentatively, in other words, You think this fine another way is... He made a throat-slitting gesture with his hand. Yes. Barton's eyes widened as he nodded. Isn't this a little arbitrary? Fong Bouguer said, When we were in the hall earlier, I didn't think their relationship was tense to the point of death. No. You don't know, Mr. Fong. Barton leaned forward and said, I've been a gardener here for 8 years, so I more or less know some things. His gossipy soul seemed to have been ignited, and he narrated with a serious face, Mrs. Odetta married Master 7 years ago. At that time, she was only 28 years old, and Master Colston was 55 years old. You should know what outsiders would think of this kind of marriage between an old man and a young woman. Yes, a pear blossom suppressing the begonia, Fong Bouguer added. Beautiful. His face was filled with fascination. What did you say? Barton was confused. It seemed that the system's translation function was unable to convey Fong Bouguer's meaning. Nothing. I just thought of something irrelevant. Fong Bouguer instantly changed his expression and brought the topic back. I think, even if they don't say it on the surface, most people will still think that Mrs. Odetta married Mr. Lovecraft for money. Yes, Barton responded and continued. So you should be able to guess the reaction of the master's 3 children when they heard the news. 3 children? Fong Bouguer asked. Is there another one besides Dennis and Jack? Yes, Master also has a daughter, Miss Nancy. Barton added, Young Master Dennis and young Master Jack are both the children of the first wife, and Miss Nancy is the child of the master and the second wife. Is Miss Nancy in this villa now? Fong Bouguer asked. No, but she should be here today, Barton replied. In fact, only Master and Madam are here. Young Master and Madam live in the city. Miss Nancy works in Vienna, and young master seems to be homeless. But every year at this time, they come back and stay until Thanksgiving. Fong Bujue quickly sorted out the situation of the family in his mind and said, "Understood. Please continue." Okay. Barton continued. When Master announced that he was going to marry the young Ms. Odetta, the family naturally thought that this woman came from Master's property. Of course, at that time, young Master Jack was busy being a rock star, and Miss Nancy was still in college. Although they were quite critical of this matter, it wasn't to the point where they couldn't accept it. But Dennis's attitude is more intense. Fong Bujue followed Barton's words. That's right. Barton said, "I'm about the same age as young Master Dennis. In fact, I quite understand him. If I had a rich father and wanted to marry a stepmother who was 5 or 6 years younger than me, I would also object." In short, the conflict between the two was foreshadowed from then on, right? Fong Bujue said. Yes, so over the years, the relationship between young Master Dennis and Mrs. Odetta has been very tense, but on the surface, they are very polite, Barton replied. Oh, Fong Bujue muttered. I heard that now. The focus of the problem seems to be Master Colston's will. Do you know anything about that? Barton heard this, recalled for a few seconds, and said, well, that was the winter 3 years ago. One afternoon, Master suddenly had a stroke in the study. Although he was finally out of danger, he had to be accompanied by crutches in the days that followed. This was undoubtedly a heavy blow to Master, who had always been healthy. After that, his physical condition became worse and worse. A few months later, he found a lawyer and made a will. Fong Bujue interrupted. Could it be that Madam asked him to make it? I don't know about that. Barton said, but young Master Dennis seems to think so, and he has argued with Master many times over the will. I remember that one time they quarreled very fiercely, and everyone in the house heard young Master shouting in the house. That woman is a witch. She should be tied to the stake and burned to death. Well, Fong Bujue thought for a moment and said, then why are you telling me these things? Because I really don't know who to ask for help, Mr. Fong, Barton said with a sad face. Barton said with a worried look on his face, Master's shooting today really scared me. What Master Dennis said is also true. I think something bad will happen if this goes on. Master and Madam have always been good to me, and I don't want to see either of them get into trouble or do something that will harm someone's life. He paused for a moment. I saw you in the corridor before. You were extremely calm in the face of unexpected situations. I can see from your eyes that you are a great person. That's why I'm telling you this. I think maybe you can talk to Master or young Master and persuade them not to do anything stupid. When Fong Bujue heard this, his expression didn't change. He was silent for a while before he said, in the end, I'm just a passerby who encountered a car accident in the mountains. I'm not qualified to tell them what to do about the Lovecraft family. Barton lowered his head and showed a disappointed expression. Fong Bujue continued, in my opinion, you are a little oversensitive, Mr. Barton. Everyone will say a few words in anger, especially when they lose control of their emotions. He spread his hands. Witches burning at the stake, they are obviously metaphors. When you said, think of another way, perhaps you were referring to using legal means or something. He stood up and patted Barton on the shoulder. Don't worry, Mr. Barton. Nothing will happen. A woman's scream suddenly sounded, interrupting Fong Bujue's words. The system's voice followed immediately. Current mission completed. Main mission updated. In the menu, stay in the villa and wait for the case to happen, had been ticked, and a new mission appeared. Investigate the crime scene and wait for the police to arrive. Chapter 383. This shouldn't be a smokescreen by the author. Fong Bujue said. The mission has been updated, and from the words investigate the crime scene and wait for the police, this is definitely a murder case. Mr. Fong. Barton looked at Fong Bujue helplessly. Did you hear that? Fong Bujue replied. Anyway, let's go take a look first. He quickly walked to the door and waved for Barton to follow him. The two ran through the corridor and headed in the direction of the scream. This time, The scream came from the first floor on the east side of the villa. It happened to be a room that was symmetrical to Brother Jew's room. Fong Bujue and Barton were the first to arrive at the scene after hearing the scream. After turning a corner in the corridor, they saw Mrs. Carroll, whose face was ashen. The woman was sitting on the ground in the corridor, murmuring, "Oh, God, no, this can't be real." Her eyes were fixed on the open door in front of her. "Ma'am, what happened? Are you okay?" Barton asked. Fong Bujue did not seem to care about Mrs. Carroll's condition. He only glanced at her briefly, then strode to the guest room and turned to look at the door. Standing at the door, they could see a man's body slumped on the sofa. His head was tilted to one side, his eyes were rolled back, and his mouth was half open. His neck, collar, and shirt were all soaked in blood. Following the sound of footsteps, a few more people arrived. The one at the front was Jack. As he walked, he asked, "What's going on?" Following closely behind were Dr. Powell, Butler Henderson, and Mrs. Odetta. They all appeared in the corridor with doubtful and worried expressions. Without saying a word, Fong Bujue rushed into the room before the onlookers could get close. He checked under the bed, the closet, and the bathroom to see if anyone was hiding there. Then, he took a closer look at the victim's wounds. After confirming that Dennis was dead, Brother Jew quickly retreated to the door and bumped into Jack. "Oh, God, Dennis!" Jack was shocked when he saw the body. After 2 seconds, he wanted to run through the door, but a strong arm stopped him and blocked him out of the door. "What are you doing? Let me in!" Jack shouted agitatedly. "He's already dead," Fong Bujue said. "You can't do anything even if you go in." He said it calmly and firmly. "If you don't want to leave any evidence against yourself at the scene of the murder, it's best not to step through this door." At this time, Henderson also came to the door. As soon as he peeked his head out and saw the body, his face convulsed. He immediately clutched his chest in pain and fell down. Jack was next to him and instinctively supported Henderson. "Hey, Henderson, are you okay?" Dr. Powell, who was not far away, hurried forward. "He has a heart condition. Quick, let him lie down first." He looked up at Barton. "Mr. Barton, I have a first aid kit in my room, please." "Oh, I'll go now." Barton did not wait for the doctor to finish his sentence and understood what he meant. He turned around and ran back. When he turned the corner, he brushed past the maid, Oliver. "What happened, Mr. Barton?" "Mr. Barton," said Oliver. But Barton did not have time to pay attention to her and rushed over anxiously. Fong Bujue, who was standing at the door, coldly observed everyone's actions. At that moment, he spoke again. "Miss Oliver." What? Sir?" Oliver, who was far away at the end of the corridor, asked blankly. "Please call the police," Fong Bujue said calmly. "There's been a murder here." Oliver's reaction was of course very shocked, but Fong Bujue's tone did not sound like he was joking at all. Combined with the situation of the people in the corridor, Oliver screamed in hindsight, "Oh, that's too scary." Fong Bujue did not have time to calm everyone down. He just did what he had to do. He turned his head to the other side and said to Mrs. Odetta, who was dumbstruck, "Madam, can I trouble you to go to the second floor and tell your husband what happened here?" "Hey, buddy." Jack, who was kneeling on the ground to help the doctor save Henderson, suddenly looked up. "Who are you? Since when are you the one calling the shots here?" "I'm just an outsider who is relatively calm." Fong Bujue's gaze quickly swept across everyone's faces. "I believe all of you should know that if there are victims, there are murderers." As soon as these words came out, everyone's expression suddenly changed. "So, before the police arrive, I hope all of you can cooperate with me to protect the scene," Fong Bujue said as he walked out of the room. He was about to close the door when he found that there was a key in the door lock facing the corridor. "Mrs. Carroll," Fong Bujue immediately asked, "when you open the door, is the door locked?" After a few minutes, with more people around, Carol's mood stabilized a little, but then she began to sob, unable to answer Fong Bujue's question. "Please answer me. This is very important," Fong Bujue asked. Yes. Carol squeezed out a sentence reluctantly. "What's wrong?" Jack asked Brother Jew. "What does that mean?" Fong Bujue raised his finger and pointed at the window opposite the guest room. That's the only window in the bedroom, and it's closed at the moment. The window handle is also in a downward state. He paused for a second, then continued. The layout of this room is the same as the guest room I'm in. There's also a frosted glass window in the bathroom, but it's very small, no more than 10 inches long. It's impossible for anyone to pass through. Jack seemed to have realized something, and his expression changed abruptly. You mean the murderer is still in the room? How is that possible? Feng Bujua denied. Who would close the windows and doors and stay at the scene after committing a crime. Besides, I've already checked just now, and there's no one else in the room. He touched his chin and said, Looks like this is a locked room murder. While they were talking, Barton had already rushed back with the medicine box. Quick, give me the medicine box. Dr. Powell took the medicine box, skillfully found the medicine he needed, and gave old Henderson a shot. Then, he used the stethoscope to listen for a moment. Then, he let out a long sigh and said, Phew, he should be fine now. I think he's just in shock. He'll be fine after half a day's rest. Powell wiped the sweat off his forehead and said, Jack, help me carry him back to the room, will you? Okay. Jack answered as he glared at Feng Bujua. He said coldly, Anyway, there's a great detective here. I don't need to get involved. Chapter 384. The police came faster than expected, arriving in 20 minutes. During these 20 minutes, Barton helped Mrs. Carroll up and sent her to the living room to rest. Henderson was carried back to his room. As he hadn't fully regained consciousness, he was temporarily taken care of by Aunt Oliver. After Jack and Powell carried Henderson away, they quickly returned to the crime scene. However, Brother Jew still guarded the door tightly, not allowing anyone to enter, including himself. Even old Master Colston, who rushed over after hearing the news, couldn't get past Feng Bujua. This family head was indeed extraordinary. Although he was very emotional when he arrived, when Feng Bujua told him the reason for stopping everyone from entering the crime scene, Colston quickly calmed down and even confirmed Brother Jew's actions. As a police car with sirens blaring stopped in front of the villa, the system notification rang in Feng Bujua's ears. His mission was updated. Assist the police in the investigation. Barton answered the door and led the few police officers to the door of the crime scene. At this time, there were 5 people waiting in the corridor. In addition to Feng Bujua, there were old Master Colston, Mrs. Odetta, young Master Jack, and Dr. Powell. 3 police officers followed behind Barton. The leading agent was dressed in a casual suit with a round hat and shiny leather shoes. He looked to be in his 50s. He was slightly plump and had a very distinctive beard. He gave off a shrewd and capable feeling. The other 2 police officers were younger. One of them had a baby face and looked like a child who had just graduated from school. Both of them were wearing uniforms. Looking at the style, it was very similar to the black British police uniforms from the 1980s, but there were some differences in the details. After all, this was a fictional country, so the difference was understandable. I'm Inspector Schofield. The plain-clothed agent walked in front of everyone and said, May I ask which one of you is Mr. Lovecraft? Colston took a few steps forward with his crutch and said, I'm Colston Lovecraft, the owner of the villa. He paused. The father of the deceased, Schofield's sharp gaze met Colston's for a few seconds, not hiding his suspicion. A detective like him had long developed an occupational disease. Compared with looking for evidence, he was better at dealing with people and finding a breakthrough in an interrogation. Then, where's the body? Schofield asked. It's in that room. Colston pointed at the door beside Feng Bujua. Well, sorry, excuse me. Schofield looked at the 2 men behind him and signaled them to follow. When the 3 of them reached the door, Feng Bujua stepped aside. When Schofield passed by Brother Jew, he looked him up and down, but didn't pay much attention to him. Instead, he turned his attention to the door. Schofield hesitated when he saw the key in the lock. He tried to turn the doorknob and found that the door was unlocked. 2 seconds later, he saw the body on the sofa behind the open door. Did anyone move the body? Schofield did not enter the room immediately, but turned around to ask. No, Jack answered. Jack added. After Caroline found the body, the house has remained the same. You are? Schofield asked. My name is Jack, Jack replied. He gestured in the direction of the body with his chin. The man sitting there is my brother Dennis. He paused and added, Carol is Dennis' wife. She's in the living room now. Schofield stared at Jack for a few seconds and looked back at the room. Were you the one who told everyone not to go in? No, it's him. Jack pointed at Fong Bujua. Schofield turned around, but before he could speak, Brother Ju said, Hello, officer. I'm Fong Bujua. Fong. When Schofield heard the name, his expression changed. He widened his eyes and looked Fong Bujua up and down again. What? You said your name is Fong Bujua? From the tone of the officer's question, Brother Ju felt like this officer had heard of his name before. He thought about the setting in the introduction and answered tentatively, Yes, Fong Bujua. I'm a detective. Oh, is that really you? Schofield suddenly raised his voice. He glanced at Brother Ju's face several times. After confirming something, he said, No wonder I thought you looked familiar. Now that I think about it, I've seen you on a newspaper before. You're that famous detective, Fong Bujua. So that's how it is. No matter what name I give to the NPC, the system will assume that I'm playing the role of that name, right? Fong Bujua said. Speaking of which, I'm really a famous detective. Even the police in this place have heard of my name, which means that I'm quite famous. I'm basically on par with Hercule Poirot, Agatha Christie's Belgian detective. Unlike a certain paranoid narcissist who lived in London and hid his fame, Poirot was by definition a very famous detective whose cases had been reported in the press and whose name was well known to the public. It is worth mentioning that in Hercule's exploits, the author vaguely hinted that in 1864, the Holmes family visited the Poirot family during their second trip to Europe. This should also be Christie's tribute to Conan Doyle. Everyone loves to be paranoid. That's it. Ah, yes, that's me. Fong Bujua maintained a calm and unfathomable expression on his face as he answered coldly. Oh, I was wondering why the general public knew how to protect the crime scene, Schofield said. So it's because you're here? At this time, the Lovecraft family members had very complicated expressions on their faces. This expression had two meanings. First, they were surprised. They didn't expect that the guy in front of them was really a famous detective. Secondly, it was a guilty conscience, because people with secrets didn't want to deal with people who specialized in revealing secrets. Oh, that's great. Schofield continued. Please give us some guidance. With you here, I think the case will be solved soon. Ha ha ha. I'll try my best. Fong Bujua laughed dryly, but in his heart, he was thinking, although I'm quite confident in my reasoning ability, is it really good to solve the case quickly? This is only the 9th chapter. If the case is solved in 5 chapters, the remaining 20 chapters will be a mess for the readers to read. Speaking of which, your name is as long as 5 words. Coupled with the frequent appearance of a 6-word surname like Lovecraft, as well as the large annotation above, it's all a despicable means to secretly lengthen the word count. The effect of this method of breaking the bottom line is actually negligible, sure enough. If I want to make it to the 33rd chapter, I still have to rely on my strength. Chapter 385. The police began their investigation. Of course, it could also be said that it was Fong Bujua's investigation work. After chatting with Schofield for a while, Brother Bujua learned that there were only 4 police officers who came to the mountain villa to investigate the murder case. Besides Schofield and the 2 men he brought into the house, there was one left outside the house to watch the car. However, this was reasonable. For a police station in such a remote area, resources were very limited. Sending 2 police cars and 4 police officers to the house already showed that they valued this case very much. It's a little late, detective. Do you want to let your men take the body back to town for an examination? When Fong Bujua asked this question, he was kneeling on the floor next to the body. He put his head close to Dennis's neck and carefully observed the wound. At this time, the people in the corridor outside the door had already left. One police officer was standing guard at the door, while another police officer began to take some preliminary statements. There's only one clinic in town. I don't think the doctor there can handle this kind of work, Schofield replied. Our town rarely has a murder case like this. If we want to do an autopsy, I'm afraid the body will have to be sent to Ogilvy City, which is half a day's journey from here. The police station there is equipped with a forensic doctor. Okay, Fong Buju interrupted. Pretend I didn't ask. As he spoke, he stood up and walked to the back of the sofa. He held Dennis's head and moved it gently. After a few seconds, he said, he was strangled to death. The wound is very thin, and it's at the back of his neck. The murder weapon should be steel wire or fishing line. Schofield followed Fong Bujue and also saw the situation at the back of Dennis's neck. Fong Bujue continued, in addition to the wound caused by the wire, there are many small, irregular wounds on the front of the neck. He raised the dead man's hand and used a toothpick to pick out a piece of flesh between the fingernails. He said, obviously, he used his fingers to pick it out. Schofield thought for a while and said, this was left when he was strangled from behind and tried to pull the wire away? A futile struggle. Fong Bujue said coldly, as long as the murderer tightened the rope tightly enough. Even if a hemp rope was used as a murder weapon, it would still be difficult for the victim to dig their fingers into the space between the hemp rope and the skin, let alone such a thin thread. If the murderer's arm was strong enough, it was possible to cut off the entire head. Listening to Brother Jew's calm narration and looking at his cold and focused expression, even Schofield, a detective who had seen many big scenes, couldn't help but shiver. The carpet in front of the sofa has traces of a deceased using the tip of her foot. It's obvious that there are a few layers of folds on the carpet. Fong Bujue looked down. Combined with the scuff marks on the carpet, my preliminary judgment is that he was strangled to death while sitting on this chair. After he died, the murder didn't move him. Speaking of this, Fong Bujue suddenly saw something. He bent down, slightly pushed the dead man's legs aside, and picked up a cigarette but from the cushion of the sofa. The next second, he immediately turned his head to look at the ashtray on the small table next to him. There were also a few cigarette butts in it. Brother Jew compared the two in front of him and even sniffed them. After confirming that they were the same brand, he said he was smoking when he was killed. So, the murderer hid somewhere in this room in advance, sneaked up on the victim from behind, and then suddenly killed him? Schofield speculated. Fong Bujue shook his head and replied, in this room, the only places to hide are under the bed, the closet, and the bathroom next door. He went to the bathroom and gave the door a gentle push. The hinges of the wooden door creaked. Most of the wooden doors and furniture make that noise. If the murderer was hiding in the bathroom or the closet, he would definitely make a sound when he came out. He came to the bedside again. As for under the bed, it's very difficult to hide an adult. Also, the victim's face was facing the bed, so he would have been seen when he came out. Then, it means that before the victim was killed, he knew that the murderer was in the same room as him, Schofield said after thinking for a few seconds. But he wasn't prepared. Fong Bujue shrugged and said, yes, the murderer must be someone who knew Dennis. So when a murderer walked to Dennis' blind spot and took out the murder weapon, Dennis was still smoking leisurely. As expected, the murderer is in this villa. Schofield muttered thoughtfully. What? It sounds like you already have a suspect? Fong Bujue asked. It's just some immature ideas, Schofield said. Why don't you say it, detective? Fong Bujue said. Schofield hesitated for a moment and glanced in the direction of the door, which was still open, before he lowered his voice slightly and said, I suspect it's Master Colston. Oh, why do you think so? Fong Bujue asked. Don't you think that old man seems too calm? Schofield said. His speech and behavior don't seem like the reaction of an old man who has just suffered the pain of losing his son. No, his reaction is normal. Before you came, when he just learned that his son was killed, he was indeed very agitated, but he calmed down faster than the average person, Fong Bujue said, because he's not an ordinary old man. He paused for a moment. There are at least 4 obvious signs on Colston that he has a military background. Dennis also mentioned this to me. Colston may have seen more corpses than you, and I have seen living people. His will is strong, and he's rational enough. This kind of person won't break down easily. As Fong Bujue spoke, he walked to the window. In addition, as you can see, Master Colston needs the help of crutches to walk, and the murderer of this case has to hold the murder weapon with both hands and approach the victim. As he spoke, his eyes lit up as if he had found something at the edge of the window frame. But he didn't stop talking. Besides, if he was in the same room with his father, Dennis wouldn't have his back to him and talk while smoking. That would be too disrespectful. Did you find something? Schofield also noticed Fong Bujue's actions and quickly followed a check. I just figured out how the murderer escaped from the secret room. Fong Bujue replied in a relaxed tone. That's not a problem. He pointed to the window frame. Look here. Schofield followed the direction that Brother Jew was pointing at and noticed a faded blood stain that had a neat edge. What does that mean? It means that the murderer directly used the murder weapon to create this secret room. After Fong Bujue said that, he opened the window and poked his head out to look. The foundation of this mansion is quite thick. The height of the window is about 7 meters from the grass outside. He climbed out. After all, this was only the first floor. Other than Colston and Oliver, everyone else is a suspect. Then, he lowered his head to inspect the footprints. Wait a minute, Fong Bujue mumbled to himself as he jumped onto the grass outside the house. Chapter 386. Unfortunately, there were no obvious clues on the lawn outside the villa, because the lawn here was made of pseudothecium. This kind of plant grew the most in summer and autumn, with well-developed stolons and strong regenerative abilities. On such a lawn, unless one could trample on it, the footprints would not stay for long. Fong Bujue looked up at the window and the outer wall of the villa. There were no traces left there either. However, he was not disappointed at all, because he was not in a hurry to find out the truth. Since it's not dark yet, I want to investigate the outside of the villa. Do you want to come with me? Fong Bujue said to Schofield, who was inside the window. Oh, okay. Schofield naturally would not give up the opportunity to ask the famous detective for advice. He replied, "Please wait a moment." Before he finished, he turned around and left the window. He ran to the door of the room and said a few words to the police officer who was standing guard. Then he turned back to the window, mimicked Fong Bujue, and jumped out from the window. The detective was quite meticulous. He was very careful when he moved, fearing that he would touch the blood on the windowsill and destroy the evidence. After they were outside the house, Schofield followed Fong Bujue and started to patrol the villa. "Mr. Fong, you just said, locked room? What does that mean?" Schofield asked. "Have you read Poe's Murder in the Rue Morgue?" Fong Bujue asked. No, Schofield said. "I rarely read novels." "Okay. Locked room murder is one of the so-called impossible crimes." Fong Bujue did not want to waste time on the topic of literature. He said directly, "When you enter the house, did you notice the key in the door?" "Yes," Schofield replied. "There are two ways to lock this kind of door. The first is, when the door is closed, the person inside the door will turn the copper hat-shaped latch on the back of the lock counterclockwise. The second is, when the door is closed, the person outside the door will use the key to turn the latch twice." Fong Bujue explained. "Mrs. Carroll, who found the body, used the key to open the door because the door was locked and no one answered." Schofield thought for a moment and continued. "In other words, when the body was found, the doors and windows of the house were all bolted from the inside. Inside the enclosed space, there was only one victim and no one else, but the state of the victim's death shows that it was not a suicide," Fong Bujue said. "In this kind of case, the method used by the killer constitutes a murder in a locked room." "Oh," he paused for a moment before asking, "Wait a minute, based on this case, what if the killer also has the key? Before you came, I asked everyone in the corridor a few questions. Of course, I also asked about this." Fong Bujue replied, "In this house, each room has two keys, one for regular use and one for spare. The spare keys are all strung together and kept by the butler, Mr. Henderson. I've already seen the chain. The iron ring is made of iron, and the key on it cannot be removed alone. It's like a dungeon key from the Middle Ages." As Henderson suddenly fell ill and fainted, The spare key is temporarily held by old Master Colston, and the regular key is a separate one. As he spoke, he took out a key from his pocket. This is the regular key to the guest room that I live in. I found it in the drawer of a table in the room. He paused and continued. The rooms that are usually empty are cleaned regularly by the maids, so they're usually not locked, and the key is placed inside the room. As Fong Bujua spoke, they had reached the back of the house. After he turned a corner, he continued, since the regular key to the guest room is with Miss Carroll, then there are 3 scenarios for the murderer to have the key. 1. The murderer is the butler, Henderson. 2. The murderer stole the spare key from the butler and returned it to the original owner after killing him and locking the door. 3. The murderer managed to duplicate a regular key. You've determined that this room is a locked room. In other words, you don't think any of these 3 scenarios are possible? Yes, Fong Bujue replied. First, in the first scenario, Butler Henderson is the murderer. He started to explain one by one. The possibility of that is close to 0, because when the old man saw the body, he was so scared that he had a heart attack and almost died. At the time, I was very close to him, and there was a doctor beside me. If that was a pretense, then Mr. Henderson would have won an Oscar, and Dr. Powell would have been his accomplice. Of course, there is another more extreme hypothesis, schizophrenia. For example, the murderer is the other personality of Butler Henderson, and the main personality knows nothing about it. I see. Schofield nodded. The possibility of the second scenario is also very low. Fong Bujue continued. Because this method is very risky and difficult. It's fine if the murderer is discovered when he stole the key, but if the murderer is discovered when he returned the key, then the murder will be exposed as well. Furthermore, during the period when the murderer stole the key and secretly returned it, Butler Henderson could have discovered that the spare key was missing at any time. This is coincidentally the time when the murderer committed the murder. If Henderson reported this to the police after the murder, then the setup of the hidden room would have been pointless. Without waiting for Schofield to respond, Brother Jew continued. The possibility of the third scenario is higher, but he suddenly stopped in front of a tree and looked up for a while before continuing. But Dennis and his wife come to the bungalow a limited number of times each year, and every time they come, the guest room they stay in is not fixed. Because Mrs. Carroll is very picky, at different seasons, she will choose different rooms facing different directions. It was impossible for the murderer to predict which room they would stay in this time. So, if it was the third situation, it meant that, except for those rooms that were occupied all year round, the murderer had stolen the keys to all the other rooms and made a backup of them. And his or her goal is to one day, after killing Dennis, disguise the room as a hidden room. That is indeed a little inconceivable, Schofield added. Technically speaking, it is possible, and the risk is not too high. Fong Bujue said, but the possibility of it actually happening is very low, and the motive is still a mystery for the time being. He walked around the big tree in front of him a few times, glanced at the second-floor window of the villa, and then continued to walk forward. To sum up, let's rule out the possibility that the murderer has the key, and then consider what other methods can we use to complete this secret chamber. Brother Jew's tone was like a teacher asking a student, but the 50-year-old detective in front of him didn't care at all. He asked, reverently, "It must have something to do with the bloodstain on the windowsill, right?" Actually, the method is very simple. It can be done with a relatively strong wire. As long as we experiment once or twice, we can do this in all the rooms with windows in this bungalow. Fong Bujue raised his hand and gestured in the direction of the bungalow. "I've finished looking outside. Let's go inside and I'll show you." Chapter 387. More than 10 minutes later, Fong Bujue led Schofield and the police officer who had been guarding outside the villa to his guest room. He was ready to demonstrate the layout of the secret room. This room was basically a mirror image of the crime scene. In addition to the complete symmetry of the layout, the structure and material of the door and window were the same. It was perfect for a reenactment of the case. Schofield was naturally full of anticipation. He wanted to see with his own eyes how the famous detective would solve the puzzle in front of him. Fong Bujue had just obtained the consent of the owner of the house and went to the utility room to get an object similar to the murder weapon, a broken string. He took it out and walked to the middle of the room. He turned back and said to the two police officers, "Since we have sufficient conditions and won't destroy the real crime scene, why don't we reenact the crime scene first?" "That means," Schofield replied, "the three of us will reenact the crime scene." "Two will do," Fong Bujue said. "I'll play the murderer." He looked at the police officer next to Schofield. "This is Deputy, sir." Officer Deputy raised the brim of his hat with his hand and introduced himself. He was a rather tall young police officer. He had the same mustache as Dennis, but his appearance and temperament were much more approachable. "Officer Deputy, your body shape is closer to the victim's. You will play the victim," Fong Bujue said. Deputy exchanged glances with his superior next to him. After getting permission, he took half a step forward and replied, "It's my pleasure, sir." "Then let's begin." Fong Bujue reached out and gestured in the direction of the chair. He said to Deputy, "Please sit on that sofa chair." Deputy strode over and bent down to sit down. "Please try to sit as naturally as possible," Fong Bujue said. Deputy replied, "Okay," he said and leaned back in the chair. Before Dennis was killed, he was sitting on the sofa and smoking like this. Fong Bujue began to explain. And the murderer was in the same room as him. He took a few steps and came to the side behind Deputy. This side of the room is all in Dennis' blind spot. There's a closet, a table, a cabinet, and the door to the bathroom here. When Dennis is not on guard, the murderer has many ways to quietly walk into this area. Fong Bujue gave an example. First, the murderer talked to Dennis and paced back and forth, slowly walking behind him. Second, the murderer claimed that he needed to go to the bathroom. Third, the murderer pretended to take something out of the closet. He walked as he spoke, quietly walking behind Schofield. "Look, this is very easy." When did you?" Schofield was stunned. He was still thinking about what Fong Bujue had said, but when he heard this, he realized that the detective had already demonstrated the first example. Fong Bujue shrugged and walked back to the sofa. When a person is not on guard and is relaxed, it is very easy to be ambushed. It can be said that most people in this world are in a state where they are not on guard most of the time. He gave another example. For example, you're sitting in a restaurant that you frequent, and suddenly, a waiter or a customer walks past you in a hurry. At this time, would your brain remind you, "Be careful, this guy might take out a knife from his sleeve and turn around to stab you in the head"? Or you're sitting in a warm and comfortable home, and after taking a shower, you are reading a serialized novel. At this time, would you consider that there is someone aiming a sniper rifle at you outside the window next to you? When Schofield and Deputy heard this, they instinctively looked at the window in the room. Fong Bujue raised his right hand and gently tapped his temple with his index finger. Our brain can't take on the task of being on guard for a long time. So, as long as we think that the environment we are in is safe, we will let down our unnecessary guard. He paused for a moment. Let's look at the case in front of us. When Dennis was killed, he was in the guest room of his father's mountain villa, and he was in the same room with someone he knew. In his mind, of course, he wouldn't be on guard that the other party might suddenly take out a steel wire and strangle him to death, but he would never have thought that. At this point, Fong Bujue picked up the strings and walked toward Deng Puti. Although Deputy knew that this was just a reenactment of the murder, he couldn't help but feel nervous. Brother Ju's strange remarks and cold-blooded tone made the police officer feel a chill down his spine. The victim's figure was very similar to yours, and the back of his neck was just right for him to lean against the back of the sofa. For the murderer, this was an ideal height for him to exert his strength. As Fong Bujue spoke, he patted Deputy's shoulder. "Please experience the feeling of being strangled from behind." Before Deputy could respond, Fong Bujue put the strings in front of his chin. "Let's assume that your neck is strangled by me at this moment, and there is a strong sense of congestion and suffocation above your neck that is taking away your life. Then, in the 1 minute before you die, how would you react in panic and pain? I would try to untie the restraint on my neck, and at the same time, Demuti thought for a while and said, I would try my best to push my body backward. Schofield heard this and looked at Brother Jew. The marks on the carpet at the scene and the scratches on the victim's neck are all evidence of these reactions. What else? Phone Buju motioned for Demuti to continue. Demuti experienced it again and suddenly thought of something. He said in surprise, I think I would try to grab the murderer's arm or body. That's right. Phone Buju nodded and said, It's just that, sitting on a sofa with a solid base and a heavy weight, and the carpet under his feet is difficult to stand on. In this state, if the victim's neck was strangled with a steel wire from behind, even if the victim tried his best to stretch his hand backward, it would be difficult for him to reach the murderer's body. Forearm, Schofield said, as if he suddenly realized something. During the victim's struggle, he would likely leave scratches on the murderer's hands, wrists, and even forearms. Phone Buju added, Not only that, he paused. Generally speaking, to strangle a 200-pound man, the murderer must be fast and powerful. However, the murderer in this case used a steel wire, which is the best tool for strangling. Not only is it easy to hide, but it also doesn't require much strength from the murderer. Even a woman or a minor can use this thing to kill a strong man. Professional killers often use this method to kill. As Brother Jew spoke, he slowly raised his hands with his palms facing forward. However, you have to be careful when using this thing. If you don't take protective measures, your palms can easily be injured. Chapter 388. Murder isn't like long-distance running or riding a bike. There's no such thing as conserving energy. Unless the murderer is an experienced professional assassin who has killed countless people and is able to control his strength perfectly, as well as be mentally prepared for the target's various reactions. Otherwise, the murderer will definitely go all out and use all his strength to tighten his grip on the target until the victim completely loses resistance. Phone Buju explained. Then, the murderer's palm will definitely have some cuts or contusions. He gestured with his own hand. The location of the injury should be around the edge of the palm, below the base of the little finger. Even if the steel wire was wrapped around the hand a few times in advance to increase the surface area of the palm, most of the force would still be absorbed by this part of the hand during the actual murder. Then doesn't that mean the case is solved? Schofield said excitedly. Forget about the secret chamber, Demuti. Hurry up and gather everyone in this villa and check their hands. Don't rush, detective. Phone Buju interrupted him weakly. Don't forget the premise I mentioned. If protective measures aren't taken, he shrugged. As long as the murderer wears a pair of slightly thicker gloves, this problem can be solved. Also, if the gloves are long enough, the probability of the victim's hand and forearm being scratched will be greatly reduced. This basin of cold water instantly extinguished the excitement in Schofield and Demuti's eyes. But you're right. Phone Buju said, we still have to check, but we have to be clear that even if there are no injuries on the hands, it doesn't necessarily mean that someone isn't the murderer. He added, also, as you can see, the victim lost a lot of blood, and his own hand was stained with a lot of blood. If the murderer wasn't wearing gloves, it's very likely that his or her hands were stained with blood, and he or she would have left bloody fingerprints everywhere when they escaped. Of course, although I don't think that's very likely, we can't rule out the possibility that the murderer washed his or her hands in the bathroom before escaping. Schofield nodded and said, well, then, in addition to the murder weapon, what we have to look out for now is a pair of bloody gloves. It's impossible to find them. Phone Buju gave them another piece of bad news. Huh? What did you say? Schofield asked. Phone Buju replied directly. After the murderer killed the people and set up the room as a secret room, the location was outside the window, that is, outside the villa. He or she only needs to walk a short distance and throw the weapon and gloves into the valley. Who will be able to find them? Schofield didn't dare to continue the conversation. As long as the detective in front of him opened his mouth, he would be able to point out a clue, but in less than 2 sentences, the clue would be cut off. Feng Bujue had already turned around and walked towards the door. When I was investigating the crime scene, I checked it very carefully. Other than the area around the body, the only bloodstain I could find was the very faint bloodstain on the windowsill. So, my speculation is as follows. At this point, he was already at the door of the room. He locked the door and continued. After the murderer killed the victim, he first wiped the murder weapon and wiped the blood off the thread as much as possible. Then, he put it aside for later use. Then he took off her gloves, turned them inside out, and crumpled them into a ball. He put them aside for the time being. Then, the murderer came over and locked the door. Of course, I think there's a 70% chance that when the murderer killed the victim, the door was already locked. Brother Ju turned around and walked towards the window. After making sure that the door was locked from the inside, the murderer took the gloves and tied the steel thread to the window. Suddenly, Feng Bujue stopped in front of the window and looked troubled. Officers, which one of you knows how to tie a slipknot? His weakness of not being good at knitting was exposed again, although it didn't matter. What kind of slipknot do you want to tie? Demuti walked over and asked. What? There are actually many kinds of knots. Feng Bujue's expression was unprecedentedly blank because the conversation had entered a blind spot for him. Yes. Demuti pushed his police cap away and scratched his hair. I have an uncle who is a sailor. When I was young, he taught me quite a lot of knots, such as the double knot, fisherman's knot, shrink knot, joint knot, figure-eight knot. At that moment, Brother Ju looked at him as if to say so, "You are the legendary colonel who has already broken through the art of tying shoelaces." Anyway, Feng Bujue changed the topic. Listen to me, and you should know what the knot is. The window of this guest room was a traditional flat window. In the middle of the left and right window leaves, there was a rake-shaped window latch. Feng Bujue pointed at the handle of one of the window latches. The murderer tied one end of the steel thread to this handle. Then he or she went outside the room, closed the window on the other side, and inserted the window latch. Next, let the latch of this window remain horizontal and slowly close it from the outside. Oh, I understand now. When Demuti heard this, he already knew what Feng Bujue meant. He took the string from Brother Ju's hand and tied it to the window latch handle quickly. Then he quickly went outside the window, held the other end of the steel thread in one hand, and slowly closed the window with the other. Then, he pulled the steel thread out from the window slit. Yes, that's it, Feng Bujue said to Schofield, who was next to him. Look, the position of the thread must be stuck in the lower edge of the window. That way, when the murderer pulled the thread, the window latch would turn down until it was properly inserted. Schofield understood. When the window latch is inserted, it will be in a vertical position. If the murderer continued to pull, the loop of the steel thread will fall off from the end of the latch handle. At that time, the knot will fall apart, and the murderer will only need to pull the thread out. He pointed to the edge of the window. During this process, due to friction, the thread will leave a bloodstain on the edge of the window. Yes, even though to prevent this plan from being exposed, the killer has already wiped away the bloodstains on the murder weapon, but to not leave a trace behind is still difficult, Feng Bujue said. Normally, after killing someone, they would try to escape from the scene as soon as possible. As Brother Ju spoke, he opened the window, pulled Demuti, and helped him climb back into the room. Although the murderer, in this case, had a plan in advance, when it came to actually carrying it out, his mentality wouldn't be too different from that of a normal person. Feng Bujue moved away from the window and paced around the room. If he or she had prepared another steel wire to set up the trap, or if he or she had used the water in the bathroom to carefully clean the weapon after the murder, then perhaps it will be more difficult for us to solve this hidden room. Usually no one would go to this extent, Schofield said. Feng Bujue laughed. This laugh was meaningful, and it made the two police officers' hair stand on end. Okay, the basic method of the murder is clear. Brother Ju stretched lazily and winked at the door. Now, let's go and have a chat with the suspects of this case. Chapter 389. just as Feng Bujue and the two police officers walked through the foyer and were about to meet up with the police officer in charge of questioning. The sound of a car came from outside the mansion. After the three of them heard the sound, they stopped and looked in the direction of the door. Schofield and Deng Pudi were confused, but Feng Bujue was as calm as ever, as if a mountain was about to collapse before him. As mentioned before, Feng Bujue had done some research on the sound of footsteps. Therefore, when the visitor got out of the car, took out her keys, and approached the door, Brother Ju already had a lot of speculations in his mind. He immediately said, "Female between 20 and 30 years old, well-proportioned body, wearing boots at this moment. She looks a little anxious." Before he finished, the door opened. A 26 or 27-year-old blonde beauty appeared in front of the door. She was wearing a jacket and jeans and a pair of leather boots on her feet. "Miss Nancy?" Feng Bujue asked tentatively. Yes. May I ask who you are?" Nancy glanced at the uniformed Dempsey. "What's the matter?" "Indeed, some terrible things have happened." Feng Bujue extended his hand and introduced the two people beside him. "This is Inspector Schofield from town, and this is Officer Demuty." The two police officers adjusted the brims of their hats and politely greeted the lady. "My name is Feng Bujue. I'm a detective," Feng Bujue continued. "Police, detective." Nancy looked worried. Feng Bujue said the word bad for two reasons. First, to prepare her mentally, and second, to test her. After seeing her reaction, Brother Ju said, "I think it's more appropriate for your family to tell you this bad news." He turned sideways and gestured to the second floor. "They're in the study on the second floor with another police officer. We can go there together." Nancy hesitated for a few seconds, then looked at Feng Bujue and the others. She didn't care that her luggage was still in the car and quickly walked to the second floor. Feng Bujue and the other two also followed behind, but because Nancy was in a hurry, she quickly left the three men in the distance. "Unbelievable," Demuty said. "Mr. Feng, how do you know what the person outside the door looks like? And you even know her name?" Listening to the sound of boots on the steps, the frequency of footsteps, the weight, and other subtle characteristics, I could basically guess the gender, weight, and age of the visitor. Feng Bujue replied. "As for the name, because I already knew some of the Lovecraft family situation, I knew that Colston had a daughter who had also come to the villa. So, after seeing her, I inferred that she was Nancy based on the color of her hair, the outline of her face, age, dress, and temperament. Of course, even before the door was opened, I guessed that it was her. After all, this is a remote place, and there won't be many visitors. If it's a fast..." He paused for a moment, almost saying the word express delivery. Fortunately, he stopped in time and changed his words. "If the family ordered goods from somewhere and asked the shop to send some necessities to their door regularly, then the person who came should be a strong man. It doesn't match the footsteps just now." Schofield looked at Brother Ju with admiration and praised. "No wonder you're a famous detective. You can think of so many things in an instant. What is this NPC doing? Is he possessed by Zheng Tai, the character in Detective Derengia?" Feng Bujue complained in his mind. "It doesn't seem wrong to change all your lines to master Zheng's common sayings. For example, benevolent teacher is truly a godly person. What you mean is there are no flaws. That makes sense. Benevolent teacher's words are extremely true. What did you think of? How did you think of it?" And so on. After changing his title to Mr. Feng, saying it out loud would be enough. "You seem to be useless, but in fact, you are an indispensable driving force in a detective movie. In this story, which only has 14 chapters, you are a nightmare. If you go on like this, in order to maintain my wise image, I will not be able to help but quickly reveal the truth." Feng Bujue finally couldn't help but whisper softly, "No. If this continues, I can't hold on. It's imperative to be appropriately unreasonable. It doesn't matter if I'm crazy. Anyway, as long as the case is solved in the end, no one will say anything." "Huh? What did you say, Mr. Feng?" Schofield asked. No. Nothing." Feng Bujue changed the topic. I suddenly thought of an idea that can help us find a murderer more effectively. He waved his hand and motioned for Schofield and Demuty to come closer. The two police officers didn't think much of it and immediately walked a few steps closer to Brother Jew, ready to listen. My plan is, Fong Bujua lowered his voice and whispered between the two police officers. After a minute, he finished speaking. Schofield and Demuty straightened up and looked at each other, then looked at Fong Bujua. A few seconds later, Schofield said with a serious face, "This is a really good idea." "Oh, really?" Fong Bujua didn't expect that Schofield would agree with his strange strategy so easily. "Actually, when I was a detective in the big city, I used to do this to those stubborn gangsters and drug dealers," Schofield said. "They're all old foxes, so I have to do something." He paused for a moment. "But the people in this villa are all famous people. I'm a detective in a small town, so it doesn't seem good to play this kind of trick on them. But with a detective like you, it's much easier," Demuty said. "We, the police, don't need to be responsible for what you say." "That's great. It's a win-win situation." Fong Bujua smiled. As the three of them talked, they had already arrived at the door of the reception room on the second floor. Before they entered the room, they heard Nancy's surprised cry. "Oh, God, this can't be true." The latter half of her sentence was laced with sobs. "Don't be too sad, sister. No one wants to see this happen," Jack replied. At this time, Fong Bujua and the other two entered the room. Glancing around the room, they saw that on the sofa, the police officer in charge of the interrogation, Mark, was recording Mrs. Carroll's statement, while Mrs. Odetta was beside Carroll, comforting her softly. Not far away, on a chair, sat Colston, frowning deeply. He was talking to Dr. Powell, who was beside him. Barton was alone in the other corner of the room, looking restless. Jack was standing not far from the door, and Nancy was crying in his arms. "Mr. Police Officer, could you please come over for a moment?" Fong Bujua said to Mark. Mark turned his head and looked at Schofield's face first. Seeing that his superior nodded, he walked over and said to Brother Jew, "Is there anything I can do for you?" "Yes." Fong Bujua purposely made eye contact with everyone in the room, and then he purposely raised his voice to say, "Can I have a word with you?" Chapter 390. 20 minutes later, in the study, Fong Bujua was sitting behind the desk, casually flipping through the booklet that Officer Mark had used to record statements. Detective Schofield, on the other hand, was sitting on a chair next to the desk. The two of them had commandeered the room and were ready to interrogate the suspects one by one. Based on the confirmed criminal evidence and relevant information in this case, we can try to make a logical depiction and judgment of the perpetrator's criminal psychology. From collecting information to inductive analysis and then to inferring the results, these three steps are the basic steps. Specifically, we use the deduction method. Fong Bujua was explaining, showing off, the theory of criminal psychology to Schofield with great interest. "Oh, deduction method. I've heard of it before." Schofield finally understood the concept. He continued, "Is it a concept from the novel Sherlock Holmes?" "No, deduction method is just a saying. This word can have many meanings." Fong Bujua shook his head. "In this case, we don't need to use the deduction method of Sherlock Holmes, but the deduction method of the so-called criminal psychological profiling." What's that?" Schofield asked. "Inferring the psychological characteristics of the criminal, and then outlining some of his or her physiological characteristics, personality traits, daily habits, and so on, so as to reduce the number of suspects and narrow down the scope of suspects." Fong Bujua explained, "This isn't strictly a science, but it is a very advanced detective concept." He licked his lips. The deduction method in criminal psychological profiling is divided into two steps. The first step is to communicate with the suspect to obtain the main evidence. These evidence can be the elements of behavior or the elements of criminal psychology. The second step is to start from the general principles of criminal psychology, evidence technology, investigation, and so on, associate the criminal behavior or criminal psychology with a specific suspect, and draw a portrait conclusion. Of course, There are more than 10 key points in the specific steps of the portrait, so I won't go into detail. I can't finish it in a short time. Anyway, I think in 10 years, these courses will be included in the curriculum of the police academy. In the future, it will be the world of academics, and those who can write reports will be promoted faster. Thump thump, just as Fong Bujua was getting further and further away from the topic, there was a knock on the door. Officer Deng Pudi stood outside the door and said, "Mrs. Carroll is here, sir." Schofield and Brother Jew looked at each other, and Brother Jew quickly nodded. Schofield then turned around and shouted, "Let her in." The door opened, and Mrs. Carroll walked in. Her eyes were red and swollen, and her tears had yet to dry. More than half of the expensive makeup on her face had been wiped away by her handkerchief. Her face, which was not considered pretty, now looked even more haggard. "I'm sorry to disturb you at a time like this." When Fong Bujua spoke, Dempsey had already closed the door behind Caroline from outside the study. Carol replied, "It's okay. You're just doing your duty." Her voice was low and slightly hoarse, a side effect of crying for a long time. Please take a seat." Fong Bujua gestured to the seat opposite him. Schofield stepped forward and held the chair for the lady so that she could sit down. "Thank you," Carol said softly to the detective and sat down in the seat facing Fong Bujua. "I'll get straight to the point." As soon as she sat down, Fong Bujua said, "The murderer is someone in this villa, right between us." Carol was mentally prepared for this. No matter how sad she was, she could have guessed something so obvious. "Who is it?" Carol asked with a trembling voice. "I did think of some hypotheses," Fong Bujua said, "but before I'm completely sure, I want to hear your opinion first." "Me?" Carol was puzzled. "Yes," Fong Bujua said. "I want to ask you, who do you think the murderer is?" Carol's eyes flickered. She was obviously thinking about something, but she still replied, I don't know. Why are you asking me?" "Ha!" Fong Bujua smiled. "Since you don't want to say, I'll explain my deduction." He leaned back in his chair and said in a relaxed tone, "I think the person who killed Dennis Lovecraft is you, Ms. Carroll." "What?" Carol was shocked and angry, and her voice rose unconsciously. "How dare you say that? I love my husband so much. My heart is about to break when he's dead, and you accuse me of being the murderer." According to your testimony, Fong Bujua wasn't affected by the other party's agitated attitude at all. He continued, "Before you opened the door was locked. After you opened the door and saw the body, you didn't even enter the room. You were so scared that you collapsed in the corridor." He shrugged. "But when we arrived at the scene, all the windows in the room were locked from the inside, and there was no other exit. Who else could the murderer be other than you? Who had the key?" He deliberately made up a story. "I think you killed the person first, then locked the room. You went out to dispose of the murder weapon and washed the blood off your hands. Then you came back and pretended to be the one who found the corpse so that you could clear your name." You're talking nonsense." Carol was so angry that she couldn't speak properly. "Why would I kill my husband? Motive? I think it's because of love." Fong Bujua raised the booklet in his hand and waved it gently. "According to Officer Mark's inquiry, you and Dennis didn't have a child, right?" "Yes. So what? Is that against the law?" Caroline countered with a question. "A couple in their 40s. The man's family was well off, and the woman's family was rich and powerful. Under the premise of no pressure in life, if the couple loved each other, why didn't they have children?" Fong Bujua murmured. "Although it's not illegal, it's very strange, don't you think so?" "This is our private matter," Carol said angrily. "Personal matters." "Huh." Fong Bujua continued as if nothing had happened. "Then, as an outsider, I can't help but continue to make wild guesses. Your husband, does he love you as much as you love him? Does he have any other motives for marrying you? As you know, although the Lovecraft family is already considered rich in the eyes of ordinary people, compared to your family." Chapter 391. "Enough," Carol shouted. "Please stop slandering my dead husband." She gritted her teeth and replied, "It's not that we don't want children. It's just—" She choked. The doctor said it's my problem. She paused, because that was all she could say. Mr. Phone, Mr. Detective, I hope you can keep this a secret. If what I said here today appears in any media. She choked on her sobs and continued. Mr. Phone, Mr. Detective, I hope you can keep this a secret. Understood, understood. Phone Bujua interrupted. If this gets out, then the biggest tycoon in Assyria will come after us. By then, Mr. Schofield will probably lose his job and pension, and I will probably be packed into a suitcase and thrown into the Mediterranean Sea. Sweat broke out on Schofield's forehead. He quickly put on a serious face and said, I swear on my honor as a police officer and my personal integrity, ma'am, your words will not be leaked. Phone Bujua continued calmly. In short, since there is such a reason, then I think I have misunderstood you. He casually retracted his words and said to Carol, So far, everything I've said is all speculation, not accusations. I hope you don't mind. I think it's hard for ordinary people not to mind what you say. Carol replied, You have every reason to be angry. I understand. Phone Bujua said, If I were you, I would be thinking something like Dennis should really leave this be asterisk star by the side of the road. Carol didn't respond, but her expression already admitted that she had been seen through. Let's go back to the first question. Phone Bujua smiled. You see, you've overturned my reasoning. I'm at my wit's end now. Unless you tell me a suspect with a potential motive, it'll be difficult to continue the investigation. Seeing this, I believe everyone understood. In fact, Brother Jew's method was to first infuriate the person being questioned by false accusations and nonsense, then claim that he was in a deadlock so that the other party would say something that they wouldn't say in a normal interrogation. At the end of the day, it was all a scam. The reaction of an innocent person to an accusation is bound to be different from that of a murderer. When these two types of people realized that the detective in front of them was incompetent, they would have different psychological changes. In addition, Brother Jew had also carefully arranged the order of the people who entered the room, because he had other tricks up his sleeve. The classic, someone has already sold you out, was one of them, but that was a story for another day. As an experienced investigator, Schofield was naturally well-versed in the tricks of separate interrogations. However, he had many misgivings about the case in front of him. Without any evidence at hand, it was inappropriate to use cops to deal with this group of law-abiding citizens who had no criminal record. Even if the case was solved in the end, people would not think of him. If the case was not solved, there would be endless trouble in the future. Furthermore, this trouble was not as simple as complaining to the higher-ups. Just as Phone Bujua said, Mrs. Caroline's family was the biggest tycoon in Assyria, and one had to add the word biggest in front of biggest. How much power did this family have in the country? For example, one night in the middle of the night, you reversed your car in an alley and accidentally killed one of their family members. Then, you would be sentenced to 7 years in prison. You would have to sell your house for compensation until you went bankrupt and your family was separated. After 7 years of court, you would be left with nothing. Then, on the same night, you were crossing the road with the traffic light green, and their family member was speeding on the street and happened to hit you and kill you. Then, that person would be sentenced to 3 years in prison with 1 year of probation. After 1 year, he would not be jailed due to good behavior. The compensation was not small, but it was only enough to buy a wheel from the sports car. In summary, if Schofield had not only failed to catch the real murderer, but also tried to frame this family, then he could basically retire early. He also couldn't expect to find another job. People could easily ruin his reputation in the national media and say that he used to be a prostitute before he became a police officer. Therefore, the detective had never thought about this at all. But he didn't expect Phone Bujua, a third party, to propose a similar interrogation strategy and volunteer to carry it out. Of course, Schofield wouldn't refuse Brother Jew's proposal. After all, they weren't the ones who offended people. Besides, Phone Bujua was a well-known detective. The monk could run away, but the temple couldn't. If the case really wasn't solved, Schofield could just vent his anger on him. Okay, after hesitating for a while, Carol finally relented. If you have to say who has a motive, I guess. I'm just guessing. Don't worry, I won't say that you accuse someone in front of others. Seeing that Schofield had taken the bait, Fong Bujue quickly reassured her. Maybe it's Odetta. Carol's gaze turned to the side. Women are such scary creatures. Fong Bujue did not show it on the surface. But internally, he was thinking, ever since you entered the room, the two of you have been chatting happily. After the incident, it was she who stayed by your side. But in the end, you still managed to say her name. Oh, why do you think so? Fong Bujue quickly asked. At the same time, he gave Schofield a look, indicating that the detective shouldn't interrupt. I don't know. Maybe it's because of old Master Colston's inheritance. Carol said. Dennis is the eldest son, so he's the biggest threat to her as a stepmother, right? And she stopped talking. And a 28-year-old woman marrying a 55-year-old man. It must have been for money in the first place. Fong Bujue said what Schofield couldn't say. Carol didn't answer him. She just lowered her head and didn't say anything. Okay, I understand. Fong Bujue said. Thank you very much for the information. I'll reconsider the whole case with the detective. He had already gotten what he wanted, so he stretched out his hand and gestured for her to leave. Please. After Mrs. Carroll left, Fong Bujue told Dempsey, who was outside the door, to bring in the next suspect. He then closed the door behind him. You're really sharp, Mr. Fong. Before Brother Jew could turn around, Schofield said, There are some things that even I can't say. Let's be frank. Just now I was so despicable, wasn't I? Fong Bujue laughed self-deprecatingly. No. Schofield smiled and waved his hand. In fact, his expression was tacit agreement. Sometimes, in order to achieve the goal of questioning, Fong Bujue said in an indifferent tone, it's inevitable that people will hate you. He walked back to the desk. It doesn't matter if the other party is male or female, old or young, tall or short. It doesn't matter if they're rich or poor. It doesn't matter if they're president, a beggar, a priest, or a hoodlum. A detective only has one goal, to get the information he wants out of them, not to win their favor. Yes. Schofield nodded, looking as if he had learned something. Fong Bujue continued, so, next, I'll make increasingly nasty remarks without losing my composure. You'd better be mentally prepared. Chapter 392. Note, the part in this chapter is Detective Schofield's inner mockery. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door again, and it was Dempsey's voice. Sir, Master Colston is here. Please come in, Schofield replied. The door opened, and Odetta appeared at the door, supporting Master Colston. After they entered the house, Colston sat down unceremoniously. After all, this was his home, and Fong Bujue and the police officers had already stolen the limelight. Sorry, we'd like to talk to Mr. Lovecraft alone, Fong Bujue said to the hostess. Can you leave first? Well, Odetta looked at Colston questioningly, and the latter nodded at her. Odetta hesitated for a moment before she walked out the door. Before she left, she seemed to remember something and turned around. Officers, Butler Henderson is awake. The doctor said that he's fine. It's getting late. If it's possible, I'd like to ask Oliver to prepare dinner. I have no objections, Schofield said. Fong Bujue looked at Colston, who didn't seem to have any objections, so he replied, Then I'll have to trouble you, Mayam. After Odetta left, Dempsey closed the door again, leaving the three of them in the room. Schofield was still sitting in his seat, but Fong Bujue began to pace slowly around Master Colston. I'm sorry to bother you again and again at a time like this, Fong Bujue said. Well, the opening is exactly the same as before. It's fine. It's your duty, Colston replied, neither servile nor overbearing. Hey, it's too strange that even the answer is the same. Only the tone is different, but the content is exactly the same. But the next sentence should be different because Colston has already sat down, so Mr. Fong can't say, please sit down. I'll get straight to the point, Fong Bujue continued. The murderer is someone in this villa, right between us. Hey, he used the exact same line after skipping that line. There was no change in Colston's expression as he calmly replied, Who do you suspect? I have indeed thought of some hypotheses. Feng Bujue pretended to be embarrassed and said, "But before I am completely sure, I want to hear your opinion first. This script is memorized by heart. I can also ask according to this method." Colston raised his head and met Feng Bujue's gaze. He coldly said, "Do you want me to accuse one of my family members?" "Not all of them are family members." Feng Bujue said, "Henderson, Oliver, Barton, and Powell, none of them have the surname Lovecraft." "In my eyes, they are family," Colston replied. "I don't want to believe that any of them are murderers." "Oh, this old man is quite humane. Can't you think of anyone who has the motive to kill Dennis?" Feng Bujue asked. "Yes," Colston replied. "It's you. You've turned the tables." "Me?" Feng Bujue said. "Oh, huh." He sneered, looking like he was asking for a beating. "What's your basis?" "There's no special basis," Colston replied. "It's just that your background is unknown. I heard from Carol that you suddenly appeared on the mountain road to stop a car. Isn't that suspicious? Maybe you're just a fake detective, and you're actually a killer or something. After killing my son, you used the identity of a detective as a cover to point the finger at someone else. That way, you can clear your name." As Colston spoke, Feng Bujue slowly walked to the desk, picked up the booklet on the table, and silently flipped through it. Until Colston finished speaking, Brother Jew did not respond. He just continued to flip through the pages with his back facing Colston. "Are you listening?" After nearly 10 seconds of silence, Colston spoke again. What? Are you done?" Feng Bujue turned his head, widened his eyes, and looked at Colston with a sneaky expression. "Hey, you obviously heard it. Are you pretending not to?" But this should be a way to provoke the other party." "Sorry, when you said there's no special basis, I started to ignore it," Feng Bujue continued. "With this sentence at the bottom, the rest of the content is basically nonsense." "Young man," Colston sneered. "If you want to provoke me, don't you think it's too funny to use a childish trick like pretending to ignore? After a series of deductions, you're unhappy because you don't have an audience." Feng Bujue responded with a similar sneer. "It seems that I've overestimated you before. You might as well curse at me, and your mouth is dirty. 5 minutes ago, you said a lot of things in a cool manner, and in the end, you were the one who emphasized to me that I should not lose my composure. Let me tell you what real deductions are." Feng Bujue's eyes turned cold as he stared at Colston. "I swear in the name of Grandpa, the mystery has been solved. I say, I feel like there are some strange lines that have been thrown in. Who is your grandpa? And you've already ruled out Colston as a suspect with the excuse of leg trouble. Now, you're undoubtedly going to say something to slander him. Is it really okay for your grandpa to lose his integrity in his old age? What are you trying to say?" Colston glared at Feng Bujue and asked, "You're the murderer." Feng Bujue pointed at Colston with an imposing manner. "Are you crazy? Do you know what you're saying?" Colston was not a woman like Carol. He was very calm and even turned to look at Schofield. "Detective? Is this person really a detective? What's the attitude of the police?" Feng Bujue did not care what he said and continued to say, "I've already solved the mystery of the locked room. When the door was locked, the murderer used a weapon like steel wire to kill Dennis. Then he jumped out of the window and used the weapon to lock the window from the outside." He raised the booklet in his hand. "You told Officer Mark that an hour before the murder, Dr. Powell took your blood pressure. After that, you stayed in the room to rest. In other words, you had enough time to sneak to the guest room on the first floor, kill him, leave the room, throw away the weapon, and then return to your room." Colston heard this and thought for a few seconds. "Is this your deduction?" He snorted and stomped the floor with his cane. "Then please tell me, how did a person who can't even walk without a cane kill someone with a steel wire? How did he jump out of the window?" Chapter 393. Humph! Feng Bujue snorted coldly. "You're faking it, aren't you?" He didn't believe it himself, but he still pointed at Colston's legs and said, "In order to set up this secret chamber today, in order to clear the suspicion of murder, From 3 years ago, you pretended that you couldn't walk properly and used crutches in your daily life. What the hell are you talking about? Colston was shocked. This theory was unbelievable. Who would pretend to be a cripple for 3 years in order to murder his own son? Pretending to sprain his legs 3 days before the murder would have the same effect. But in fact, you're still agile. With your skills as a retired veteran, killing someone is a piece of cake. Feng Bujue continued. As for the motive, I think everyone in this house saw it today. When you were arguing with Dennis, you actually fired 2 shots, which means that you couldn't stand him anymore. If it weren't for the fact that it would be too easy to find out after the shooting, you wouldn't have aimed at the ceiling. Colston was finally infuriated and became part of Brother Jew's taunts. He roared furiously. You be asterisk starred. What the F asterisk CK are you talking about? What? Are you angry after I exposed you? Feng Bujue maintained an arrogant expression and said, or, do you think there's a flaw in my flawless reasoning? Hey, is there a flaw in your flawed reasoning? Schofield continued to complain in his heart. Because Brother Jew's words were so nonsensical, the detective was too embarrassed to speak up. After Colston cursed a few times, he seemed to calm down a little. He was still a reasonable person, so he replied, you can ask Dr. Powell about my physical condition. He glared at Feng Bujue. If you think I bribed the doctor, I can show you the certificate issued by the best hospital in the country, as well as my insurance records. Feng Bujue immediately put on an awkward expression and stammered. So that's how it is. So, do you still think it's a piece of cake for me to kill someone? Feng Bujue rubbed his chin and muttered, but it's true that you had a fierce argument with Dennis today. He pretended to be enlightened. Oh, yes. The murderer must be Dr. Powell. After you had an argument with Dennis and kicked him out, you and Powell conspired to kill someone in the room. He was the executor, and you were the mastermind. At the time, I only asked Powell to take my blood pressure and inject me with today's medicine. Colston replied. This is something I have to do every day. He paused for a moment. Also, why would Dr. Powell kill someone for me? He's not a killer. Do you think that if I told someone who works in the villa, I'll give you a sum of money to kill someone for me, that person would do it? That's hard to say. Feng Bujue said as he turned his back to Colston and slowly walked toward the desk. At that moment, his gaze changed and his tone became cold. If you've made up your mind to kill someone, there's always a way. He probed. That depends on how serious the conflict between you and Dennis is. That's my son. What conflict could there be between us? Colston asked. Even if there's a conflict, it's impossible for there to be any killing intent. Oh, then may I ask, what is the core of your conflict today? Feng Bujue asked. This is my family matter. Colston replied in a low voice. Family matter? Feng Bujue smiled. With all due respect, if you can avoid the question with just these 2 words, then probably half of the murder cases in the world won't get a confession. He began to mislead the other party. From the time you and Dennis quarreled and fired the gun to when he was killed and discovered, there was only a little over an hour. Master Colston, you're also a knowledgeable person. You should know very well that no matter who investigates this case, you won't be able to avoid the question in the end. What exactly did you and Dennis quarrel about? If you tell me now, Detective Schofield and I will be the only ones who know about this. After the case is solved, no one will bring it up again. But if you insist on not saying anything and the case drags on, one day you'll be forced to answer on the witness stand or in the dock in court. At that time, there will be a jury, reporters, and a bunch of ordinary citizens watching the show. The person asking you questions is likely to be a biased prosecutor who hates the rich and will induce you to say more things that are disadvantageous to you. And your answers will all be recorded by the court and even published in the newspapers. That's enough. Colston was tricked by Feng Bujue just like that. Due to the concern that Feng Bujue had given him, the old man had to make a decision. If that's the case, his eyes scanned Feng Bujue and Schofield's faces separately. I can tell you, but you have to promise that this will not be leaked to other people, especially my family. I promise, sir, Schofield said. I'm a man of my word. Feng Bujue also said, don't worry, this won't spread outside of this study. At this point, Brother Jew finally got his way. He had never doubted Colston. The reason why he had taken such a big detour was to get the family head to personally say what exactly Dennis and his quarrel was about. Although Barton had already told Fong Bujua the secret, Brother Jew didn't completely trust the gardener. So, he wanted to hear it from Colston himself. Of course, even if what Colston said was different from what Barton said, it didn't prove that Barton was lying. After all, Dennis was dead, and Colston could say whatever he wanted. He didn't know that Barton had gone to Fong Bujua. There was a third scenario. Both of them were lying, and the situation was even more complicated. Dennis wanted to monopolize my inheritance, Colston said. This was his answer. Monopolize, is it? Fong Bujua asked knowingly. So you have a will? And the content of this will didn't satisfy Dennis, did it? Yes, I have a will, Colston said. But other than me and my lawyer, no one knows the content of the will. He paused for a few seconds. Of course, Dennis doesn't know either, but he thinks, in that will, I distributed the inheritance to inappropriate people, so we quarreled. This was roughly the same as what Barton said, but he was evasive. Obviously, he omitted Odetta's name. However, Fong Bujua faintly felt that there was more to Colston's words. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.